Everyone, and welcome to our extraordinary meeting of the Transport Regeneration and Climate Policy meeting today, which is the last of the municipal year. Today's meeting is open to the public. However, there is an appendix that is attached to the report on item 11 of the agenda that's not available to members of the public and press because it contains some exempt information. If members wish to discuss information in that appendix, we'll need to ask the members of the public and press to kindly leave for that part of the meeting, and then we would of course pause the webcast. The meeting will be webcast and the recording will be available for people to view later through the Council's website. It's also possible that Sheffield Live TV will record and rebroadcast this meeting. Now, we've received two questions from members of the public on issues to be discussed today in our meeting. Please can I request that mobile phones and other such equipment are switched to silent mode so as not to disturb the conduct of the meeting. And it's important to say that there's no fire alarm test planned for today. And if there is an emergency evacuation that is needed, then please do follow the instructions of the town hall staff. As I understand, there may well have been some adjustments during the snooker to the assembly point. Please could I also ask committee members in a second to introduce themselves, and I'll also ask officers who are in a seated position to do the same. My name is Councillor Ben Miskell. I am a councillor for Park and Arbourthorne Ward and also chair of the committee, and I'll just turn to Janet to introduce herself.
Thanks. Good morning. I'm Councillor Janet Riddler, member for Stocksbridge and Upper Don.
Hi, I'm Craig Gamble-Pugh. I'm councillor for East Ecclesfield.
Hi, I'm Alexi Diamond, councillor for Clevedless Valley and deputy chair of this committee.
Good morning. I'm Councillor Ruth Mercereau, councillor for City Ward.
Good morning. I'm Councillor Ian Horner, councillor for Bayton.
Good morning. Andrew Sanger, councillor for Forward Ward and group spokesperson on this committee.
Good morning. I'm Councillor Richard Shaw, councillor for Bishop and Greenhill Ward.
Thank you very much, Councillor Shaw. And a number of officers will introduce themselves through the course of the meeting today, but I'll just ask officers who are in a seated position to introduce themselves. Robert and then Rachel. Robert.
Good morning. I'm Robert Parkin, Assistant Director for Legal Services and the Legal Advisor to the committee today.
Morning everyone, I'm Rachel Appleyard, Principal Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you very much everyone for being part of our meeting today. I think before we do start our committee meeting today, because this is our last meeting of the municipal year, I think it's very important for us to take a moment to acknowledge all the contributions that colleagues have made, members of the committee but also council officers and citizens throughout the city who have come to our committee meetings. I think it's probably important also to acknowledge the contribution particularly of two colleagues, as this will be their final meeting of the municipal year. First, I'd like to thank Kate Trockrell, who will shortly be presenting the walking, wheeling and cycling investment plan. Now, Kate has been with us, as I understand it, 34 years in this organisation, which is an awful lot of service to this city, and it's important that this committee acknowledges that. And she has had a real impact on transport in the city, and we're really immensely grateful for her service, and we do wish her a very happy retirement. I'd also like to extend our thanks and recognition to Tom Finnegan-Smith, who's our Assistant Director of City Transport now. Tom will be, of course, presenting a number of items today, but it's important that we thank him for his service. Now, Tom is going to be moving on to a new role in South Yorkshire's Mayoral Combined Authority, which we wish him every luck with, and we'll also continue to work with him in the future. Now, we all know that Tom's provided some really strong leadership and vision and really assisted us as councillors in our role. So we thank him for his service, and we're really grateful for it, and also what he and all of us as a city have managed to achieve together. So thank you very much to Kate and Tom in particular for your service. We really do very much appreciate it. And I'm sure that the rest of the committee would certainly agree, and I can see them nodding as well. So we'll move on to the formal items for consideration at our committee meeting today. Item 1 on our agenda is an opportunity to consider any apologies for absence. I'll just turn to Rachel just for clarification on whether we've received any.
Yes, we've received apologies from Councillor John Wright.
Thank you very much, Rachel, and of course those apologies will be noted, and we wish John a very speedy recovery. I think he's not very well today. Item 2 is an opportunity to consider whether we would need to exclude the press or the public for any items. I think, as we mentioned during the introduction, if members wish to discuss the confidential information in the appendix at item 11 in our agenda, then we'll need to ask members of the public and press to kindly leave for part of that meeting. And of course, we would pause the webcast. It might well be that members don't wish to discuss items, particularly in appendix or the appendix for item 11, because that's been subject to discussions in knowledge briefings before this particular meeting, but of course you are very much welcome to request that we discuss that particular item that is confidential. Item 3 is an opportunity for us to receive any declarations of interest from members of the committee. So therefore, can I ask members of the committee if they wish to declare an interest, and if they do, could they please state the item of business on the agenda? And it would be useful also if you tell us whether it was a pecuniary or a personal interest, and of course outline the reason for that declaration. Do I see any colleagues wishing to make a declaration? I don't, so therefore we'd move on to item 4 of our agenda, which is a really important item that we have at the top of all of our meetings, which is an opportunity for public questions and statements. There is a maximum of 30 minutes for this particular item of business, and we've received 2 agenda-related questions today. And I understand that we've got one of those people who is asking a question here. The first question, however, that we received was from members of Cycle Sheffield. As I understand it, they are not here today, but we'll make sure that they do have a written answer. Their question was particularly related to school streets and about the enforcement of school streets. Now, we've got 18 school streets across our city. 12 of them are permanent and 6 of them are trials, and these are things that we're incredibly proud of and will continue to roll out as a city. They have cross-party support. We'll make sure that members of Cycle Sheffield do receive a written answer to that particular question. The second question that we've received is from Ben James. Ben, I think you have a colleague with you here today. You're more than welcome to come up to the front and ask your question just down here if you're comfortable to do so. If you could take a seat in one of the chairs and you can press the microphone when you're comfortable to do so, that would be brilliant. As I understand it, I think you've also got some pictures that you'd like to go through with us as well. And I think Alan can put those up on the screen, and I think they'll be available for people to look at externally on the webcast. And Alan is nodding too. So if you just wait a second, Alan will put those up on the screen, and hopefully it'll help bring to life what you're talking about.
Give us a nod.
Tell them the question. So, me and my business partner own a company called One Up Access, which is going to be affected by the one-way system on Foley Street. So the question we have is regarding our vehicles entering and leaving the premises, and it has a vehicle swipe past analyse being done on the entrance to Norfolk Bridge Business Park off Foley Street. If so, can we please see the results, because we firmly don't believe an articulated HGV with a trailer of 13.6 metres can turn right into the business park and left out of the business park. So these pictures show us sort of replicated this morning, and what we're having to do is take a shunt back onto the cycle path blind with our lorries, which we feel is very dangerous. So we just want some consideration into what for us as a business, because we can't then access our business park safely. We have quite a lot of movements, up to 100 a week, coming in and out, sometimes a day. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming along to the meeting today. As I understand it, I think you've also been in communication with your local MP, Clive Betts, and he's due to come out and see you, I think, later this week, perhaps
11:30 on Friday.
On Friday, which is wonderful, and we'll look forward to receiving an update from Clive when he has come out to visit you. I've had a discussion with Tom Finnegan-Smith, our Assistant Director for City Transport, in order to prepare to answer your question. And I think what I can say is that we're committed to working with you to deal with the issues that you've identified. I think the pictures are very, very useful. As I understand it, we've now shared those with council officers who are able to look through the technical aspects of them. Quite clearly, our prime motivation is to make sure that our roads in the city are safe, and will continue to do so. That's important that we are able to achieve on that. It's part of our commitment to Vision Zero, which is to eliminate all fatalities and serious injuries on Sheffield's roads. Quite clearly, whilst doing that, we also need to make sure that your business is able to operate and operate in a safe way. So you have our commitment, and I've spoken to Tom Finnegan-Smith, our Assistant Director for City Transport, that he's tasked council officers to work with you to try and deal with these issues. And we're determined to find a solution that works for your business so that you can continue to gain access to it with vehicles, but also that is able to operate in a safe as possible way. So we'll look forward to continuing to work with you about this. We thank you very much for sharing the images, and we'll also look forward to hearing the outcome of the visit with your local MP, I think, on Friday at the end of the week as well. So thank you. It's genuinely important that you've come today. I think it's highlighted an issue. I think it's very useful to us as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, colleagues, that draws to an end the items that we have that are subject to public questions and statements. We received no statements for today's meeting. That therefore would take us to item 5, which is an opportunity for us to consider the work programme. Now we are at the end of our municipal year, so we have got a work programme that has got lots of things that will be carried forward into a new municipal year, which is part of our planning process. I think it's good that we've got those on there. I'll just turn to Rachel, who will take us through the work programme. We know that it's a live document and is subject to lots of discussions that we would have outside this meeting as well.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so the work programme aims to show all the known agenda items for upcoming meetings. The provisional dates or the months for meetings during the next year have been added, and there are some items for the first few meetings. There's been a few changes since the last meeting. These are highlighted in the table on page 16, particularly the addition of a new item on the Sheffield e-bike hire scheme, and some amended items as well. And I'll hand over to officers if you've got any specific questions on them. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel, for taking us through that. Colleagues, do we have any particular questions or points of clarification about the work programme? Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. Last month, the all-party parliamentary group for cycling and walking released their report of their inquiry into social justice in relation to active travel, which is concerned primarily about addressing the wide disparities in participation in cycling, walking and wheeling for different demographics. So, for instance, women, members of the LGBTQIA plus community, ethnic minorities and people with disabilities are much less likely to walk or cycle due to various barriers to participation, including greater risks of harassment or assault, or the economic costs associated with cycling, poor infrastructure, and so on. And it made a number of recommendations that were applicable to national government, to local, regional mayors, and to local authorities. So I would like to request that we ask for a report from officers to look at that report from the parliamentary group, and to bring a report to us with with how those recommendations can be included in our existing policies and taken forward into future policies and projects that are still in development. So I'd like to propose that addition to the work programme, please, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Shaw, and thank you very much for spotlighting that important work from the All-Party Parliamentary Group on cycling and walking. You know, it really is an important piece of work and also an important group. I wonder whether it might be something that we could bring to some of our knowledge briefings, perhaps. I'm quite aware that the next report that we're just about to receive will be about our walking, wheeling and cycling investment plan, which will chart how we're going to make investment decisions over the next 20 years. It is really ambitious, as I understand it, and officers will take us through much more detail. But those investment decisions are very much driven by transport-related social exclusion and that particular metric, which very much does support what the All-Party Parliamentary Group on cycling and walking have been talking about. I wonder whether you'd be happy to receive a report as part of our knowledge briefings rather than necessarily add something else onto an already busy formal decision-making process during this meeting, and whether you'd be happy to take it as part of a knowledge briefing.
I would be happy to. Receive a knowledge briefing from officers about how they can incorporate those findings into the report. But I would like at some point over the forthcoming municipal year, at least, for us to report back on how this local authority is going to implement those very, very sensible recommendations in the report. It's a very brief report. I recommend every member of the committee to read it. It's only about 20 pages, so it's much less than the usual reports that we receive at this committee. But it does make for some sobering reading in terms of the sheer disparities in participation in walking and cycling for various different communities. So I'm happy to have a knowledge briefing, and perhaps once we've had that, maybe we can make a future decision about whether to add it to the work programme, but that's something I would like to pursue. Thank you, Chair.
If the committee is happy to support Councillor Shaw's proposal, therefore we would take this to a knowledge briefing, and then that will be subject to a discussion amongst members about how best we can take this forward. It might also be a great opportunity to talk about those 9 key recommendations as part of the discussion that we have in a short while as for item 6 about the walking, wheeling and cycling investment plan, and how that supports those 9 key recommendations as well. So it looks like committee members are very happy to support that proposal. We'll discuss further in knowledge briefings, and then we'll see whether we need to bring it back formally as part of these meetings as well. So thank you very much for spotlighting that important piece of work. And do I see any other colleagues who have got a question? I think Councillor Sanger.
Thanks, Chair. And it's very much wanting sort of an officer reflection on pages 24 to 26, the items that are either coming up next municipal year or we haven't been able to deal with this time. And clearly there are a mixture of items, some of which have slipped off the agenda this year because further work has been required and they will be coming early next year. I think my concerns remain in terms of how we as a committee deal with the regeneration schemes, which are hugely important but are delivered over a period of years. And I also notice we've got 3 reports on flood alleviation, flood prevention, and I think we had ambitions to deal with those earlier, either in this municipal year or the previous municipal year. So I just wondered if there had been any other work and any other reflections on how the process has worked, because clearly this year we've had a number of months where we have expected at sort of the 8-week to go period an item to go to the committee, and it's gone to a later committee, and we've ended up with a significant number of items into next year, some of which I think we were always expected to go into next year, but some of which have slipped from this year. So just what are the sort of reflections on how do we improve the process for next year? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Sanger. I think those are important points. We do, of course, have something in diaries in the new municipal year at the very start where we're going to be going through the work programme, and I think that would be a great opportunity for us to be able to vocalise some of those concerns and make sure that we've got a work programme that works for us but also works for the city. Now, at this opportunity, I would normally take the guidance of officers, but unfortunately we've got a visit to the city from 3CI. 3CI is the City's Commission for Climate Investment, and as I understand it, both Will Stewart and Sean McLean are involved in some forms in that meeting. I think that Sean will be with us shortly, but I can't turn to them at the moment in order to be able to get you that particular answer or reflection. So if you're happy with that, then what we'll do is we'll bring those particular points, we'll note them and we'll bring them to our workshop session that we'll have in the next municipal year. Is that okay, Councillor Sanger? Thank you very much. Colleagues, do I see any other comments or questions or suggestions about the work programme, which is item 5? I don't, so that therefore takes us into the next section of our agenda, which is an opportunity for us to consider items that require formal decision making. So for each of these substantive items on our agenda today, please could I of course remind everyone of the process that we do always follow in this committee meeting. Officers and those supporting officers will be invited to present their reports to the committee. Members and the public have had access to the reports in advance, so of course we would ask officers to please assume that everyone, including members, have read those reports and provide that sort of high-level summary that of course you will do. This is then going to be followed by questions or an opportunity for questions from members to those officers and those supporting officers today. And once all those questions have been asked and responses provided, we'll then move on to the discussion if one is needed and if colleagues are mindful of that. After any discussion has taken place, then those recommendations might be moved and seconded and a vote would then be taken. Of course, we've been doing this for some time, so I'm sure that members are well aware of that process. So item 6 on our agenda is a very exciting part of our agenda. It's the Sheffield Walking, Wheeling and Cycling Investment Plan, which is part of a wider piece of work across all South Yorkshire authorities, and we're very proud today to be bringing it forward. It's on item 29 of the agenda pack, and the investment plan and its appendices, and there are many of them, it just shows the substantial piece of work that this has been, are in the supplementary pack. And the presenting officers today are going to be Kate and also Ed Clancy, who is South Yorkshire's Active Travel Commissioner. And as I understand it, I think Nicola Marshall, who is Simca's excellent Active Travel Programme Director, is also in attendance and may well come to sit in front of us today, but she might also stay where she is, who knows. So Kate and Ed and possibly Nicola, if you could come to the microphone, that would be really good. And we look forward to hearing more about the Walking, Wheeling and Cycling Investment Plan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your kind words earlier on. And it's a pleasure to be attending committee with this report in my last week at the council. I would just say to anybody listening online that despite the trials and tribulations, I would thoroughly recommend working in local government.
Okay, what year did you start in the council?
1991.
91. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for your service.
Thank you. So, yes, this report recommends the council, the committee approves the Walking, Wheeling and Cycling Investment Plan for Sheffield. As you mentioned, Chair, it's being developed alongside South Yorkshire colleagues and similar plans for other parts of South Yorkshire. And I'm very pleased that the committee has invited Ed Clancy to come along and say a few words in support after I've introduced the report. So it's an ambitious plan which sets out the council's ambition to develop high quality citywide networks for walking, wheeling and cycling, alongside complementary measures to support and enable everyone to make use of them more easily and safely. It is, of course, one of the delivery plans which arises from the Transport Vision that committee approved last year for a safe, reliable and low-carbon transport network for everyone. Also strongly supports the Council plan and the growth plan objectives around people, prosperity and planet and the future sustainable growth of the city. There's quite a lot in the plan, but in terms of as an investment plan, so it includes information on what is already being done or has been done or is already in development and funded in the short term. What and where would be the next areas to focus improvements on, so the medium term for the next 10 years or so. And then for the longer term, what a citywide network might look like. Focusing on the medium term, the plan identifies some focus areas which would then go on to the next stage of development in terms of developing projects, working with the communities, etc., based around the themes of routes to opportunity, so employment, training, education, often linking in with the public transport network, and vibrant neighbourhoods, so improving local access to local centres and local facilities. Those areas were identified using the multi-criteria tool that was approved by committee last October, looking at indicators such as health indicators, economic deprivation, road safety and so on. We also made links with projects already in development, as well as, of course, being aware of the Council's intention to be a much more pedestrian-friendly city going forward. Alongside those focus areas, there will obviously continue to be projects delivered citywide to address local accessibility and connectivity. Part of the purpose of an investment plan is, of course, to assist in bringing in funding for us to be able to do all of this. Most immediately, that's likely to link in with the government settlement to Simca for 2027 to 2032. Which may or may not be called a City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement, which will follow on from the current spending review. The short-term programme outlined in the plan represents about 120 million of capital investment. To deliver that quality of projects across a wider portfolio, we'll need more additional funding across both capital and revenue so that we can deliver infrastructure and what we are getting into the habit of calling hardware and the supporting software projects. And the plan indicatively has a figure of between 300 and 400 million for the medium term as an aspiration, which hopefully Simca will be battling for us with government to get as much as possible. So the plan provides the footing to go forwards and develop proposals. Engagement to date, also reported back in October, shows there is an appetite for walking and cycling more, as well as highlighting the barriers for that. We learned something about journey patterns in local areas and the key destinations that people go to and would like to go to. And as we go forward, we will continue to listen to those voices that are less heard and to build those relationships and involve communities throughout the future development. And obviously working with colleagues across the council, because there are many other parts of the council working on building neighbourhoods and opportunities for the people of Sheffield. So at that point, I'm going to hand over to Ed.
Thanks very much, Kate. First of all, big thank you to all the officers that have been involved in building this plan. Not least of which Kate, thank you for being so welcoming. 33 years is a great stint, congratulations. I know it's been a challenge to work with us at Simca and build this strategy and these plans in collaboration. Also thanks to all the members in the room that have engaged, that have cooperated, collaborated. I've tried hard to listen to as many voices, many people, members, execs, leaders, tens of thousands of members of the public to try and influence parts of the plan. It's not been easy, but I believe it's the right way to go about our business. So, in terms of what this is, this is one of 4 local investment plans which will all come together to form the walking, wheeling, cycling plan across South Yorkshire. And in terms of our proposed priorities, health, growth, to inclusive growth, and better places. So just to touch on those quickly, it's no surprise that we're not the healthiest region in the UK yet. We have a healthy life expectancy of just 61. There's a massive disparity between our life expectancy, 20 years life expectancy difference between our wealthiest and poorest postcodes across Sheffield. Touch on growth. Across South Yorkshire, there's 350,000 people that don't have access to cars. In Sheffield, there's up to 80% of postcodes in areas that don't have access to cars, and of course, I believe with walking, wheeling and cycling, we can make a difference to that. And better places. You know, something that was apparent to me at many an event over the last 2 years is that people are proud. People are proud of the history, the past, and they want to live in nice places. And I think as long as there's cooperation with programs, projects, schemes, people want to see investment in the neighbourhood to create better places. Now, in terms of how we go about our business and how we work, imagine a very basic strategy house, and at the bottom we have this foundation of community support and engagement, and we need excellent community engagement. We want to be co-designing projects with communities. Sheffield, you've done a great job demonstrating that, and that's clear in this plan. On top of this sort of foundation of excellent community support is a proposed twin track approach with neighbourhoods and routes to opportunities, and trying to create a synergy between the two. In terms of neighbourhoods, we want everyone, whether they're 3 years old or 93 years old, to feel like they're welcome to walk, wheel and cycle in the neighbourhoods, and there's this growing understanding. We've commissioned certain professors, Tim Gill, Pete Dyson. There's an understanding that people's journey starts and finishes at the front door. Routes to opportunity, so this is perhaps a little bit more walking, wheeling, cycling in its traditional sense. We want people to use high quality infrastructure to get to work, learning opportunities, and of course it needs seamless links with bus, tram, train and so on. Just to touch on your point very, very quickly, Councillor, the all-party parliamentary group for walking, wheeling, cycling, I've had a scan, and whilst this isn't an official report by any means of the stretch of the imagination, I do think globally there's an understanding that it's about helping those that need the help the most. And I know there's more sort of tangible things like cycle hubs, pavement parking, but I do believe all of this is reflected in Sheffield's plan. In terms of Sheffield's plan, we really welcome it. There's been a growing ambition that I've seen across Sheffield. We've seen that with the hardware. Greater green, there's so many things happening in the city centre right now, the new style of roundabout, which is great to see. Software projects, it was mentioned earlier by Cycle Sheffield. We've got nearly 20 school streets across Sheffield now, which is great to see, and I know that's got universal support. We really appreciate the focus on walking and wheeling. We think that's the way forward. And a final point on funding. I know this is very much in discussion across our region right now. I suppose my job and our job is to do the best case of making a big case for it, putting the best case forward. It's worth acknowledging that funding is going to be tight, but we're trying to do our best by co-designing and co-creating. And I think, to be honest, the thing that's held us back in the past is that we haven't had a clear and investable pipeline to buy into. And I think, given this strategy and the 3 others that are going to soon arrive, and the overall South Yorkshire strategy, I sincerely hope we'll be in a very different place by the end of this summer. So, thanks everyone.
Thanks, Ed. I'm going to hand back to the Chair.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you very much, Ed, and thank you so much for the ambition, Ed, as well, that you have shown for South Yorkshire and the support that you provided to us here in Sheffield. You know, I know that members here, but also our council officers, are very grateful of the support that you and the wider team at Synca provide to us. colleagues, I can see Richard Shaw, Councillor Shaw, indicating, but I can also see Councillor Mersrow and Councillor Horner and Councillor Sayer. So Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. Yesterday, I had the pleasure of meeting with the student cabinet at Meadowhead School in my capacity as deputy chair of the South Lack and one of the local councillors to listen to their concerns affecting young people in the south of the city. So I'd like to thank them again for inviting me to spend time with them, discussing those issues when so many of them are studying for exams at the moment. Not surprisingly, a sizable amount of their concerns relate to transport, including poor bus reliability, lack of connectivity between neighbourhoods and high fares, and they want more cycle lanes and for them not to just stop at random points along the road. They want better east-west bus and tram links to connect their school with Bradway and Clevedless and beyond, and not be forced to travel like a large distance kind of regularly in and out of the city centre in order to travel relatively to a destination a relative short distance away. When I was rereading the report last night and looking at the proposed network maps for cycling and walking, there's a large void when it comes to connectivity between like Meadowhead and Clevedless and Charnock, where people, where pupils living in those areas are forced to basically be ferried to and from school by car, because there's no footpaths, there's no cycleways, and there's no public transport along that route, and they'd much rather travel independently by public transport or walk or cycle. So we have Bockham Parkway, but what we need is a Bockham Bikeway as well. So the question that I'd like to ask is, to what degree of those homeschool journeys and the voices of young people have been considered, and whether we could treat all primary and secondary schools in the city as core walking zones, like we've done in this version of the plan for the hospitals and the universities, to ensure that all people within the catchment areas of those schools, whether they're pupils or staff, can have can walk or cycle safely to their schools.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. I'm just going to take our next speaker and then just come back for some reflections from officers. Councillor Mersrow.
Thank you, and thanks to officers for all the work that's gone into this really excellent report, which helps to bring forward our stated vision to become a pedestrian-friendly city. It's really positive to hear about the award-winning work that's been done on engagement. And also, I'm really pleased that the report highlights the many advantages to enabling more walking, wheeling and cycling in terms of public health, well-being, air quality improvements, cohesion, fairness, equality and economic benefits, decreasing road danger and supporting decarbonisation. And it's really vital to ensure greater equality of opportunity for those without access to a car. My only regret is that we don't envision having the resources to do much more, much sooner than 2035 or 2045. As walking, wheeling and cycling sit at the top of the transport hierarchy, we really need to ensure that future investment for this is protected and expanded. I'd also comment that walking, wheeling and cycling are the cheapest way to get around, which leaves people with more money to spend on other things. It's good to see in the introduction talk about the benefits for walking, wheeling and cycling for mental and physical health too, because when the infrastructure is safe and the journey is pleasant rather than stressful, walking, wheeling and cycling is actively enjoyable rather than a commute that's a stressful drain of time. I was interested to read recently a research paper on commuting which emphasised well-being and enjoyment over journey time and efficiency. And I'd certainly welcome prioritising well-being and safety over journey time and efficiency in our future transport planning. I've got comments on specific pages, so I'll just bring up my notes. On page 3, it says that South Yorkshire has historically received less investment across the board, including in transport. So I'm very keen that we now invest properly in a transport system that works better for everyone. Page 11, it states that between 2017 and 2023, over 800 people were killed or seriously injured while walking or cycling in Sheffield, when our commuting rates by walking and cycling are low. Only 8.5% of Sheffielders walk to work and only 1.5% cycle, but the people walking and cycling made up 44% of those killed or seriously injured across the 7-year period, which is really shocking, and we really need to do something about this. Page 17 of the document, when reviewing the walking, wheeling and cycling investment plan, TRC is to consider including the following matters within the investment plan. There then follows a list of recommendations that would make Sheffield a less pedestrian hostile city. However, several of these, parking enforcement, removal of obstacles, fall within the remit of the Waste and Street Scene Committee. So can we please make sure that these recommendations are included in the work of the Parking Task and Finish group? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mesereau, and thank you also to Councillor Shaw. If we could have reflections from officers and colleagues from Simca on those particular points, and also Councillor Shaw's very interesting intervention about lots of things, including the Bockham Bikeway, which I think is the first time I've heard that being coined. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for the questions. I guess the theme from both members is we want to do more. We'd all love to do more. Hopefully the plan that we've produced is realistic, ambitious but realistic in the current climate, the level of resources that we have. Should more become available and this can help to make the case, then we would love to do more. I'm just going to pick up Councillor Mesereau's point about the recommendations. Is that's the connection with the council motion? I just wanted to mention that one of the things that has been set up as we've been doing this work is we've set up an officer group cross departments, a strategic walking, wheeling and cycling group, which Susan Hurd in Public Health is chairing. It doesn't include officers across the whole of the council. For instance, it doesn't include parking services at the moment. It's only been going for maybe a year, so I guess it's fairly early days. But one of the things that somebody in Public Health has been tasked with is looking at that motion and the various different strands of it, and what we are doing on all of those and where there are gaps. So that's something that we're on with. I haven't got any other comments. Tom, do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you. Just a few, if that's okay. Just again, as Kate says, this is very much around a plan to do more. That is kind of the kind of ambition that this plan sets out, and you know, we do feel that is kind of a realistic ambition. But we will need to understand what financial position we're working within very soon. But certainly, kind of that ambition is very clear. Hopefully, that comes through in terms of the report and the plan itself. Just a couple of other points around kind of priorities. Clearly, this plan is, as Kate has set out, really there to act as part of a tool, a suite of plans that make the case for kind of high levels of investment focused on those routes to opportunity and in neighbourhoods. Some of those issues around schools will be central to how we work in neighbourhoods as kind of really, you know, kind of primary institutions within neighbourhoods as part of that core community. So we will definitely be doing that. We do have wider programmes as well. So in terms of safety, this plan will be looking at building and embedding in safe, inclusive cycle infrastructure and walking infrastructure and wheeling infrastructure. But there are wider programmes and measures that we'll be doing as a city to continue to kind of improve safety. One of those is on the report, on one of the reports later on in this committee agenda. And similarly, you know, kind of that wider transport investment is something that you know, kind of walking, wheeling, cycling fits into, but that broader ambition as a region is something that clearly, in conversations with Simca, we are making that case for additional investment to pick up on those points around integration, the bus opportunities that you've mentioned associated and aligned to franchising, which is coming forward now. So, yeah, this plan is central in setting out that ambition for walking, wheeling, cycling, but our transport vision as a city sets that out too, and clearly there's a commitment to try and accelerate where possible and expand absolutely where possible.
Thank you very much, Tom. I've got Councillor Horner who wishes to make a contribution, and then Councillor Sanger. Councillor Shaw wants to come back.
Thank you, Chair. It's just I don't think you addressed my question about what engagement has been done with younger people, and schools in the formulation of this plan and how they can be involved going forward.
I'll respond. So, yeah, thank you, Councillor. So, in terms of certainly the plan at this stage, as you'll see, sets out those key priority areas within the city where kind of resources will be prioritised and focused. Obviously, the level of activity that we're able to undertake will be kind of subject to funds that are available. The plan, though, does set out kind of high-level priority areas, and we're not proposing schemes at this stage. So one of the things that the plan sets out is how we'll take forward that open engagement, that inclusive approach to getting communities' views on, businesses, residences' views on our proposals as those schemes do develop in detail. That ambition to kind of collaborate at an early stage instead of presenting communities with what they may perceive as a done deal. So absolutely through that further work and further development, which is probably where community interest, certainly in my experience, always starts to spike when you're going into an area and talking to them specifically about what's right or wrong in their neighbourhood, what's right, what do they want to see in terms of the future changes. That certainly will bring in kind of engagement with schools. We in terms of the specific engagement to inform the plan, what we've done is we've worked with a number of community organisations, and they are representative of their communities. We would probably have to take away in terms of specific youth engagement, but in terms of that commitment moving forward, that is there from a kind of a different approach to taking these schemes forward with early stage community consultation, engagement and collaboration.
And it might be useful, Councillor Shaw, as well, for me to add a little bit to that. I remember a number of months now going out and seeing how this consultation was going now. Quite clearly the report talks about how there were 1,400 people who took their time to share their views and share the plan, which is really good. But I remember going out to one of those community groups, I think it was Pitsmoor Adventure Playground, and it was really, really wonderful. Actually there it was a beautifully warm day, you got young people who were playing on some of the amazing playground equipment, and you've got families who were sitting around too, and those members of staff who had got those relationships with those members of the community were running those families through a series of questions and talking to them about kind of what mattered to them in their locality, how they wanted their streets to look, how they wanted to kind of move around our city, and it was really wonderful to be able to see that. So I think the strategy that we've employed here in terms of community engagement is perhaps one that's very different to one that the council often operates, and it has been about kind of involving community groups, and I saw that firsthand. It was really wonderful to see. Ed.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Councillor. Just a global point. First of all, this is a good problem. It's great to see as well, Ruth, that you're both keen for more of this. That's good news for me, and the more support we can get on this entire project universally, the better. I tell you what, when you see this world with beginner's eyes, let's say, it's amazing how little revenue money we have. And Dr. Tim Gill, that we've commissioned a couple of times to come and speak to our officers, he's got this beautiful one-liner that children have an innate desire for fun, freedom, exploration, and I'm of the opinion that we build that out of them because they don't have the opportunity to walk, wheel, cycle in the early days. So back to that key point, it's great that you're supportive of this, and whilst I can't speak on the sort of scheme specifics, and I know Sheffield has done a great job of prioritising where we can make the biggest difference with a finite amount of time, energy and money, rest assured I'm trying to get my hands on as much as we possibly can.
Thank you very much, Ed. Councillor Horner and then Councillor Sanko.
Thank you, Chair. Similar point to everybody else about wanting more. For some of us living in the southeast, where we're out on the extremity, I was wondering just now how I could get a reference to Canada in, but I do occasionally feel like the last Mountie on the northwest frontier, because people in the southeast are not going to cycle into the city centre now, or indeed in the near future. But what is important is to facilitate them being able to get to, particularly the tram, for instance, that we look at better provision for cycle parking at tram stops, but we also look for cycle lanes. Because living in Baton, yes, we can access the tram, but it's up and down a hill. So actually, I think people probably would prefer to cycle if they could than walk up the hill sometimes. But that needs cycle lanes, and that's not easy because it's an old mining village originally. And, you know, I recognise the difficulties in this, but I do think it's important that I know we've got to start somewhere. And for all the extremities of the city, that's difficult. But it is important, just as Councillor Shaw said, that we look at little individual schemes in the outlying parts of the city that might enable people to access better walking, better cycling. I've made the point before about getting to Rother Valley. Yes, you can walk from the tram stop, but by gum, you say I'd love to go a wandering route to go there. You know, there's not a direct route down the parkway, which there ought to be. So it's things like that I'd urge you to look at. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Sango, I think you also had a point.
Yes, Chair. I mean, it's clearly really important to have an investment plan over 10 years because it allows us to see how schemes fit together and to be clear what our vision is. And I really welcome the approach that has been taken in terms of engaging with communities on this. So just a few points. I mean, firstly, just like to thank Kate for all of her work, and I hope that this plan is part of her legacy in terms of making sure that Sheffield continues to support walking and wheeling and cycling. Kate started work same year as I joined the council, so I'm going to keep pushing this. I mean, and I think with this agenda, 10 years can make a difference. 2035, a lot can be done in terms of changes to walking, wheeling and cycling in 10 years. And I say that as somebody who, remembers the first report about electrifying the Midland Main Line in 1984, we've been talking about the challenges of deregulation of buses, which happened in 86, and we're only now unpicking it. Almost the first day that Supertram started working in the early 90s, people were talking about extensions, and we've had very minor extensions. So I think with walking, wheeling and cycling, we can make a big difference in a 10-year strategy. I think if you have an investment plan, you can reach out to the mayoral authority, but also reach out to government in terms of finding the capital funding. Particularly want to talk about the importance of young people and schools and the need to instill walking, wheeling, cycling as a preferred way of getting to and from school for all of our schools in all of our communities. And that shouldn't just be about prioritising in deprived areas. That has to be everywhere. I know when I was executive member for Children's Services, some of the schools with the highest drive to school figures was actually not in the deprived areas. Not surprising because they often have a lot lower car ownership. So some of this challenge is about making sure we have safe walking routes and safe cycling routes to schools. And people will know my commitment that the footpath route on Hanging Water Road to High Store School is still not there. We really do need a crossing or a solution so that children from Never Green can walk safely to High Store School. We saw last month in terms of the double yellow line reports, and some of those were connected with safety around schools, how the challenge in terms of getting residents to realise that we do need as Councillor Mercer has said, to drive down these statistics, these serious injury and fatality figures. and particularly in terms of children and young people. I mean, it's still shocking how many we have, and I'm really frustrated that we as a council have been talking about these things a long time, and we still have so many cycle routes where there's just it's a lovely cycle route for a bit, and then you have to cross a busy road, or it's the cycleway suddenly ends. That doesn't happen as often with footways and footpaths, but there's enough, and Councillor Shaw has talked about, the problem on Bocken Parkway, and so I've talked about Hanging Water Road, but there are plenty of other examples across the city where there isn't an appropriate crossing or the footpath just ends. So if we have a strategy, we can at least see what we're doing. And I really think from a public health point of view, making sure that our children start off with good intentions and they've spent their school life walking, wheeling and cycling, or then at secondary school maybe using the bus, that they're more likely to carry on walking, wheeling and cycling. And if we have an ambition in terms of our neighbourhoods or places where walking, wheeling and cycling is the expected thing you do for short journeys, then it'll be easier to continue that argument for the longer journey. And I know, our cycling colleagues would say it's not just about reducing about increasing the number of very short journeys, but that ambition for longer journeys for cycling. So yes, support this, but we need to learn from the mistakes we've made in the past, where we've often had schemes with gaps in. But this is a real opportunity to make a real difference, and 10 years you can make more difference on walking, wheeling, cycling than you can when we're talking about heavy rail or light rail, or even, frankly, sometimes the bus improvements seem to take a long time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sanger and Councillor Horner. Could I have some reflections back from council officers on those two particular points?
Just good to hear all of that. As I said before, we would love to do more. I just wanted to pick up what Councillor Horner was saying about linking in with public transport. That's obviously something that is a theme of the plan in terms of routes to opportunities, and I know it's something that colleagues at Simca, who are working in the active travel team, are very keen to take forward. So thoroughly support that, and the plan supports that.
Thank you. And Nicola, thank you very much for joining us. If you'd like to make a contribution, then feel free to pass your microphone.
Yeah, it was just to chip in on schools and neighbourhoods. So I think that is, I would say that Sheffield across South Yorkshire, and actually partly nationally as well, is really leading the way in terms of school streets particularly, but also the really strong network of mode shift styles officers that you've got within the council. Your public health team are doing a research piece at the moment around the transition between primary and secondary, about active and sustainable travel modes, and so we'll be building that into plans. We have also got some additional investment at the MCA to really build what we mean about this neighbourhoods concept, and we'd really like children's voices to be at the heart of that. In a previous role, I've done a lot of kind of youth engagement, and I think how we support children and families to design what we want around neighbourhoods and what they want around neighbourhoods, I think can really strengthen it. And I guess what I would say is a lot of discussion obviously about funding. We are going to, obviously Ed is very passionate about getting as much funding as we can for this. There are lots of other priorities, as you'll be aware, across transport, and it will be, for this committee and for Sheffield Council to prioritise within those sort of priority areas. And it might be that you think that schools and neighbourhoods is a really key focus, and obviously we'll want to support in that. And it feels like there's a lot of energy within Sheffield around the schools piece. So something we're keen to work with you more on.
Thank you very much, Nicola, for your reflections there about working with families, but also kind of neighbourhoods more broadly. I think, Councillor Diamond, you also had a point or question as well.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I'd just like to echo the thanks to you, Kate, for the report, and Tom, and for your long service and dedication to support transport in Sheffield. And also thank you to Nicola and Ed for all the engagement they've done with us and taking the time to come and meet us all. So that has been really good. Really welcome this report, but I do echo the comments that everyone has made. I think the report is really good, and it clearly states the rationale, urgency for and benefits of the walking, wheeling, cycling investment plan. I do think the potential benefits are a bit understated in terms of the equality impact assessment, because I think if the plan is successful and builds momentum, it could be a game changer in terms of all of the things that are identified in terms of public health, inclusion, community cohesion, road safety, and crucially, progress to net zero. Just to highlight some bits of the report. And on health, it says that rates of physical activity amongst some of the Sheffield population are low and actually showing a downward trend. 1 in 4 people said they are inactive, which means they undertake less than 30 minutes of physical activity per week, which is an increase of 3.5% compared to 2021-22. So that's, I mean, that shows how important it is that we remove the barriers to accessibility and sort of encourage people, give them the option, and also show that it is beneficial, more enjoyable, as Ruth said earlier. Talking about equity, the report also references how women and minoritised communities are disproportionately impacted by road danger and concerns about personal safety, and also disabled people and children identified poor conditions of footways and obstructed parking as barriers to walking, wheeling and cycling, which aligns very much with the report from the All Parliamentary Group on walking and cycling, and the comments that Councillor Shaw made regarding school journeys. I'd ask if we were to get a really good funding settlement, would the plan be able to be accelerated so it could deliver things faster? And I'd also urge colleagues of the need to look at all options for raising revenue funds at the level of council in case the funds aren't forthcoming and austerity continuing. Because I believe that we could do more, but we need to be brave as members. I think the role of the police and parking services will be essential in ensuring the success of this plan, as will further engagement and public information. Unfortunately, too many of Sheffield drivers at the moment, including licensed taxi drivers, are ignorant of the highway code. I don't think this is a national problem. I think drivers should have to do tests to update their knowledge of the highway code. I mean, drivers think that cyclists have to ride single file. That's not true. They think they overtake people when it's not safe to do so. And the statistics on road danger in the report speak for themselves. So we need to ensure that people feel confident to walk, wheel and cycle safely. I think that's another, as it identified, major barrier for children walking, wheeling, cycling, because parents are reluctant to let their children do that at the moment. I think we need to urgently agree on a policy for cycling infrastructure, such as the rollout of cycle parking and secure storage. So I'm just wondering if officers could comment on this, because we need to roll this out at scale as other cities have done or are in the process of doing. Just also, I suppose, I think that environment is not prominent enough with the report, because this could have a really big impact on the environment in our progress to net zero. And I'd like to remind colleagues that Sheffield has already used 54% of our carbon budget to 2100. So, this is key to achieving net zero, as well as all the other benefits in terms of mental, physical health, road safety, air quality. But yeah, thanks for this report, and really looking forward to progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Diamond. Can I have any final reflections from officers, both at Sheffield City Council, but also Simca may also wish to reflect as well.
Just a quick one from me, which is that if we can do things more quickly, great. But a lot of these things, particularly, a lot of these things are not easy to do. They do take time. We want to bring people with us. So that requires not only officers in city transport to be doing these things, but everybody across the council, leadership, and more broadly across the city.
Yeah. Thanks, Alexi. Just on the revenue point, apologies for the slightly cryptic message, but we're having one positive conversation with a key national stakeholder for revenue money, and also there's another key regional conversation going on for the potential of some, I guess it'd be corporate philanthropic funding. But I totally agree that we can never have enough revenue money. Thanks.
Just briefly on the parking aspects, I think often when we talk about parking, we think about vehicles on our streets. We will be bringing forward a parking plan. It's one of those delivery plans underneath our transport vision that the walking, wheeling and cycling plan fits into. So we do reference some parking aspects within this plan, but that broader plan will need to look at kind of street priorities, how we use space on street for parking, and that inevitably will include things like cycle hangers that we're rolling out in residential areas, which you'll be familiar with. And again, yes, there are other places in the country that are doing more of that, but we're certainly on that pathway to doing more. Again, that will come through and be worked on with you as a committee collaboratively and bring that to a future committee.
Thank you very much. Do I see any other members who wish to make a contribution that doesn't necessarily involve asking a question of officers? I don't. So thank you very much for bringing this item today. I think probably it's important for me to very quickly summarise some of the points that I think that colleagues have made, and also to thank officers as well for the work that's gone into this, but also I think the stewardship that Kate has given in bringing it together. And I think in summary of today's debate, it's important to say that, of course, we are approving this really bold and ambitious 20-year investment plan. It's a pipeline of improvements that's going to be worth between 300 and 400 million pounds, and it really is going to transform how people move and access opportunities right across Sheffield. And I think it's probably important to say that we shouldn't really underestimate the scale of the transformation and the scale of the need that drives it. And I think, as Councillor Sanger reflected, particularly on his many years of service in the council since 1991 and the decisions back then that brave politicians took decades ago to introduce the Supertram, and how that investment has paid dividends many years later. I'm sure that in decades to come, people look back on the steps that we're taking now with this pipeline in a similar way. But of course, it isn't just about the infrastructure or the infrastructure for the sake of building infrastructure. Really, it's about tackling transport-related social exclusion. And I think, as Councillor Shaw raised earlier in his plea for us to consider those recommendations of the all-party parliamentary group, it really is about us building a fairer and more connected city. And I think I reflect a little bit on conversations that I have with other members outside this chamber, and particularly Councillor Naz, who's member for Darnall, and she rightly points out to me in discussions that she has with members of her ward that people often struggle to access higher paid jobs just a few miles away simply because of a lack of decent transport options. And I think we all agree in this committee that that has to change, and this is an important stepping stone on helping us to do that. And of course the issue goes even deeper, doesn't it? Because we know, and I'm a school teacher 2 days a week and I see it firsthand, but right now over 23% of year 6 children, so we're talking about people who are around 10 years old in Sheffield, are living with obesity. And I think, as Ed has highlighted, and it's a point that I think that Councillor Diamond also made, about in some neighbourhoods people live up to 10 years less in good health than others, and those inequalities are things that we all have to deal with and all have to change. And I think this plan helps us to do that and sets us on a good course. Councillor Mersrow also really rightly pointed out the need for future investments to support Vision Zero. And I think she's entirely right about that. We've all collectively made that responsibility that we all share collectively to make journeys safer on streets in Sheffield on a cross-party basis. And I think with that in mind, I'm really pleased to hear Nicola's reflections from Simca that Sheffield is really leading the way when it comes to the development of school streets, working with children and families to develop those really healthy travel habits, and also, importantly, to construct those neighbourhoods in a way that help support those healthy travel habits. And all of this, I guess, is why I think it's really important to focus on why this plan helps us to deliver real and genuine choice for people in terms of how they travel, whether that's on foot or bike or using a mobility aid, because actually it really is about opening access for people to have opportunities to access schools, to jobs, green spaces and local services. And I think in closing and us having an opportunity to vote on this particular matter, I think it's also important to recognise the leadership that South Yorkshire's Mayor Oliver Coppard has shown in championing active travel and setting that really clear ambition to develop an accessible and inclusive transport network, which we're building on here. And it really does build on that point that Councillor Horner points out earlier in our discussion about the need for active travel to connect and interchange properly with public transport. And I think this plan helps us to move much closer to that. And with bus franchising from 2027 in Sheffield, that gives us lots of opportunities to bring about that interconnected system of transport and mobility in our city. And I think it's probably an important wider point about devolution too that I would make. I think it's worth noting the role that elected mayors are playing across the UK in supporting councils just like ours in delivering on active travel, and that collaboration, that one team approach that we have in South Yorkshire that is actually modelled in other areas as well when it comes to delivering on active transport. And also, I think it's important to say, and I think Councillor Shaw made some really important points about consultation earlier, to thank on behalf of the committee those 1,400 people who took their time to share their views and really helped us shape these plans. So thank you very much to colleagues for considering this. Thank you very much to officers and also officers' supporters in Simca for helping us put this together. Now we have an opportunity to consider whether we are content with approving this particular item, which is item 6, the Sheffield Walking, Wheeling and Cycling Investment Plan. Do I see that colleagues are content or happy with us approving it? If you are not, then please do raise your hands to show your discontent. I'm seeing that colleagues are nodding. Can I see that colleagues are nodding? Yes, that's unanimously passed. I've seen no dissent from colleagues. So the Sheffield Walking, Wheeling and Cycling Investment Plan therefore is approved, and thank you very much for bringing it to us today. It's really appreciated. Our next item is item 7, which is our review into green parking permits. And the officers that are presenting today are Tom Finnegan-Smith, Jenny Wood, but also supported by Ben Brailsford as well. And thank you very much as well, Ben, for coming in to assist too. We'll let you introduce this item. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Chair. So this is a report on green parking permits, which has been written following a request made by Waste and Street Scene Committee for officers to work together with parking services to examine and review the scheme and report any findings and recommendations to the appropriate committee. So green parking permits were introduced 20 years ago and previously reviewed in 2019. The original purpose was to help to encourage motorists to switch to cleaner vehicles, at which times they're at a very early stage of adoption. Currently, green permits are provided free of charge to vehicles that are classed as ultra-low emission vehicles to park in Sheffield Council run on and off street pay and display bays in the city centre for free, subject to the terms and conditions. Anyone with eligible vehicles can apply for one. They last for a year and have to be reviewed annually. Whilst it is felt that the permits were an appropriate incentive in the early stages of take-up of electric and ultra-low emission vehicles, the market has changed significantly over recent years. Many more people have now made the switch, with many thousands more electric and ultra-low emission vehicles on Sheffield's roads, and the support needing to focus on the remaining key barriers to adoption, including the available of accessible and reliable electric vehicle charging infrastructure. As the number of vehicles is forecast to increase rapidly over the coming years, there's also a need to ensure that all drivers make a fair contribution, which is reflected nationally with these vehicles being brought into the tax system via vehicle exercise duty in recent months. The scheme has been reviewed in this context against the need to support the transition to electric vehicles, which we absolutely do, and decarbonisation of transport, alongside public transport, walking and cycling measures. aligning with place, air quality and road safety ambitions for a vibrant and livable city centre, and ensuring that the costs of parking don't fall disproportionately on those with lower incomes or that still face barriers who may not yet have been able to make that transition. The report is therefore making the recommendation that the Council approve and no longer issue new or renew existing green parking permits from the 31st of July 2025. That would mean that green permits will gradually reduce as the existing permits expire, with the scheme completely ending by the 31st of July 2026. It's also recommended that the Council note that the support for the transition to zero-emission vehicles alongside walking, cycling and the use of public transport, as well as the work that the Council is doing to help support the transition to zero-emission vehicles, such as installing our first residential charging point this year in 9 locations across the city, working with South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority to access £8.9 million capital from Government's Local Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Fund, which is designed to support the deployment across South Yorkshire of local charge points at scale and further developing our delivery plan. And also to request that the joint task and finish group that has been set up between Transport, Regeneration and Climate Policy Committee and Waste and Street Scene Policy Committee develop an investment plan to ensure that any surplus income generated is used in an appropriate manner, including for projects breaking down the barriers to electric vehicle ownership, with the allocation of £125,000 towards improved electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Given the overall cost of zero-emission vehicles, the maturity of the technology and the projected growth in vehicle sales, both nationally and in Sheffield, the removal of green parking permits is not thought to be likely to have a significant impact on this take-up trajectory. Through projects to break down the remaining barriers, alongside improvements to public transport and efforts to encourage walking and cycling, the Council will help to drive down emissions and support more sustainable, inclusive travel across the city. We should also note that exemptions from paying display tariffs applying to blue badge holders and motorcycles would continue to apply, reflecting the Council's commitment to prioritising access to the city centre for those with the greatest need, including people with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jenny, for taking us through that report. It's really appreciated, and thank you very much, officers, for taking us through that paper. I'd also like to thank Councillor Otten, who's chair of the Waste and Street Scene Policy Committee. Now, his committee will receive a report in June confirming the recommendations set out here if the committee if our committee is minded to support them, that £125,000 of revenue funding be allocated to improving electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Now, as Jenny has outlined, that's a really important step in helping to remove those barriers to EV ownership and supporting our wider transport and climate goals. So thank you very much to Councillor Otten and colleagues on Waste and Street Scene Policy Committee for supporting us in that. Can I see any colleagues who wish to ask a question or make a contribution on this particular item? Councillor Diamond.
Thank you very much, Chair, and really welcome this report, and thank you to the officers that put work into this. I think it is really an urgent report because the level of permits has become completely unsustainable. As the report sets out, there are now 5,802 permits, but there are fewer than 1,800 council-operated parking spaces in the city centre. And with so many drivers holding permits being commuters who stay in the parking spaces all day, there are fewer spaces for people who pay for the parking spaces, fewer spaces for blue badge holders and other people who might genuinely need to bring a vehicle into the city centre while other options are not available. At the moment, the situation is actually increasing congestion, air pollution and road danger as people drive around looking for a space. It also means that parking services have fewer resources to effectively manage the public transport and active travel network, which is so important to the success of walking, wheeling, cycling investment plan, and for example, the Darnall Attercliffe city centre route that we're going to be looking at later. I think the investment plan, which we'll be looking at in the task and finish group with TRC and Waste and Street Scene members, will be a vital piece of work to ensure that parking services have the resources to effectively manage the network, and also we can support walking, wheeling, cycling, public transport and EV infrastructure as we like to. So thank you very much for that.
Councillor Sanger.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, I agree with the previous comments. I mean, I'd just like to thank the officers for the speed that they've been working on this. They brought this report to us in a really quick manner, so I really welcome that. I mean, this was clearly a policy, you know, that did make a difference and that did encourage people to move to electric vehicles, which is a good thing. But as others have said, it's been too successful, and we now need to use that space both for people staying in car parks shorter, but particularly for blue badge holders. And if we can use the money for electric vehicle charging infrastructure across the city, that will help more people make the transition to electric vehicles. So really welcome the work that's doing that, and I look forward to the work of the task and finish group and the recommendations that they make. So we'll be supporting this, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sanger. I'll just go to Jenny and Tom and perhaps Ben for any reflections on those particular points that are made by Councillor Diamond, but also Councillor Sanger.
Yeah, I think, yes, would agree with those points as reflected in the report, and the supporting the forecast trajectory towards the growth in electric vehicles, which is supported by Council's transport vision and decarbonisation policies. So that's all really. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you very much, Jenny, for taking us through that report. Do I see any other colleagues who wish to make a wider contribution that perhaps doesn't require an officer to respond to? Councillor Campbell-Pugh.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to say that I welcome this report. Thanks to the officers for putting it together for us, and I just wanted to put my hands up and say I've been somebody that's been quite sceptical about the idea of phasing out or removing the green parking permits. I've spoken on that before. It felt when it was first being discussed in briefings a year or more ago, like it was potentially counterintuitive. And I think we had discussed at times in the past that we needed to have some kind of mechanism where we didn't just increase the revenue that was coming in to people paying for parking, but we made sure that additional income was used to kind of lever further behavioural change, to encourage and support people to be travelling, using active travel options, or continuing to make the transition towards less polluting vehicles. So I'm really pleased that we've got the suggestion now that the increased income will be diverted towards such measures. Just conscious that that is a decision for Waste and Street Scene Committee rather than this committee. And whilst I am minded to vote in favour of this proposal, I just wondered whether are we empowered to make our approval subject to the Waste and Street Scene Committee subsequently agreeing to our recommendation that they use this funding, because at the minute we've got this illogical situation where this matter is split between the remits of two committees. So I would just like to know what our powers are on that. But I would just like to say that as someone that was a doubter, I have been persuaded by the arguments on this, and I welcome this report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Campbell-Pugh. I'll just turn to Robert for some legal guidance.
Thanks, Chair. I think, staying on the fence a bit, I'm not sure I could definitively confirm that we could make a subject to decision. What I would say though is that if on balance the overall picture is unsatisfactory to the things that this committee is looking over, it may be that the committee calls it back in to have another look, which appreciate the horse may have bolted at that stage, but I don't see at the moment, without taking it away, that we could make it subject to them carry out their part. I think Tom Finnegan-Smith, Chair, is going to add something, hopefully, to help.
Absolutely, and I think that's a really interesting point as well that Robert makes. The decision that Waste and Street Scene will be taking will be in June of the next municipal year, so very shortly. And I think Robert's saying that if that decision wasn't to support what we had recommended here, then of course we could change our decision making at the next meeting, perhaps in July. However, it's probably important to say that yesterday I did test this, and I did email officers who then subsequently had discussions with the political leadership of the Waste and Street Scene Policy Committee, who did confirm that they would receive a report and that report in June would commit to that £125,000 of additional revenue going into new public charge points. So we do have that assurance, and I do have that in writing as well, but I do appreciate the committee's concern about it. Tom, I think you wanted to reflect on this.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And it's probably less so from a kind of governance position, more from a pragmatic approach to enacting today's decision, really. So we've set out in the report that the change will be brought in from the 31st of July, and that's to provide sufficient time around the administration of some of that change and to mobilise that change and provide kind of existing permit holders with some contact from us to inform them of the change. So we do feel that there's a need for time to be able to do that. I don't think that kind of circumvents the potential for a further decision of this committee in advance of the change actually being enacted on the 31st of July. But I did just want to highlight that really from today, we will start to mobilise around the decision that the committee makes. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom, and I think Rob wanted to come back with another reflection.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry for tying things up again. So it was really, appreciate the point. So I think this is around the part 4 of the recommendations, essentially, which is the monies that the joint task and finish group will be charged with developing plans over. That acts as a sort of sounding, but also a development pool, and members of this committee no doubt will get feedback on how that work goes. That will give an indication of travel from joint membership, and whilst it's not a hardwired and firm condition, I would hope that it provides feedback so that this committee, if it in an informed way wishes to look at the matter afresh, it can at least do so. It's not entirely tidy by way of a condition, but I would hope, as I say, that it provides feedback and therefore confidence.
Thank you very much, Robert. Councillor Campbell-Pugh, does that provide you with kind of sufficient assurance and clarity? I appreciate that our governance system does make this a little bit messier than it perhaps should be. Councillor Campbell-Pugh.
So just to clarify that my understanding is correct, we feel reasonably confident that the other committee is inclined to support this measure because they've cooperated on the production of the report. But constitutionally, if we decided today that we want to approve scrapping this, the recommendation to move on from the current arrangements for the green parking permit, and then the Waste and Street Scene Committee, having carefully considered and debated the report, decide actually no, we don't want to do that with this funding. We want to use it for something else. Legally, are we then able to pull this call for another meeting to call this decision back in? Are we restricted from rediscussing the same thing, or are we constitutionally able to discuss it again and reverse our decision?
I just had that clarified by Robert from a legal perspective. I don't think we are limited to then kind of reconsidering this particular item if circumstances did change. I will just go to Ben Brailsford because yesterday, Ben, we did have discussions, didn't we, via email, because I'm mindful that you had a knowledge briefing, I think, with members from across the political spectrum in Waste and Street Scene, and I think you've also received correspondence as well from the chair and perhaps others about this, so that might provide the committee with some more assurance.
Thank you, Councillor Miskell. Yes, just to confirm, the committee chair has indicated that he's pleased to receive a report in June. So I think, you know, as soon as a decision is made today, if that's a positive decision, we will be putting 4 months together to get that onto the forward plan, so it'll be available for that June meeting. And officers are in a position where they can take forward a report for that June meeting. Certainly in the knowledge briefing, I think it's fair to say the committee members appeared in favour of the recommendations that have been provided on this report. So I don't see at this point there's any kind of indication that there wouldn't be support going forward to have a look at how we support our electric vehicle infrastructure in this city to the tune of £125,000.
Thank you very much, Ben, for adding clarity to our understanding there, and I think Councillor Campbell-Pugh seems to be nodding and is therefore content with that way forward. Do I see any other colleagues who wish to make a contribution? I don't, and I think it's probably important just to, in summarising the debate that we've had, of course, we've heard members and council officers talk about that sharp rise in zero emission electric vehicles that we've seen on our roads in recent years, and it's something that we all support. I think this update to the green parking permit reflects that progress really, but it also aligns our approach with that national policy on vehicle excise duty that Jenny has highlighted in the report, and really creates a fairer system for all drivers. I think when the scheme was first introduced 15 years ago, of course, it was the right solution for the time, and I think that was the point that Councillor Diamond has made, but actually the landscape has changed dramatically. Our city centre has now been transformed and continues to be transformed with significantly more footfall, and there are now significantly more zero emission vehicles on our streets. And now, of course, one of the biggest barriers to further uptake remains access to reliable, convenient charging infrastructure. And that's where our attention is now shifting to. And I think, as Councillor Campbell-Pugh also made in an excellent point, our intention here is really, really clear. It's about making sure that additional revenue is invested into electric vehicle infrastructure. And that does mean, and we've had discussions about this and discussions about ensuring that it does happen, that extra £125,000 is then invested into public charge points as a result of this change. And that's on top of that significant investment that we're also making, both in the city, but also more broadly across South Yorkshire, supported by South Yorkshire's Mayor Oliver Coppard, to support EV drivers when it comes to EV charging infrastructure as well. So I'd like to thank colleagues for your discussions and points that you've made, but also in particular to Jenny and to Ben and also to Tom for bringing this paper here today. Do I see that colleagues are content with us approving this particular item, which is item 7 on green parking permits? If colleagues aren't, then can I ask that they raise their hand to show their dissent? I'm seeing that colleagues are nodding in agreement. There are no hands showing to dissent this particular item, so therefore it has been carried and approved. Thank you very much for bringing it today, and also the discussions before bringing this item to committee. The next item that we're here to consider is item 8, which is the Crookes Valley Road Local Safety Scheme. It's on page 49 of our agenda pack, and the presenting officer is going to be Susie Pryor. Susie, I think you're here and going to be supported again by Tom, so thank you very much.
Good morning. I'm here to talk about the report that I've submitted on the consultation response to the proposal to introduce a local safety scheme on Crookes Valley Road from the junction of Harcourt Road to the junction of Oxford Street. The scheme aims to improve road safety, particularly for pedestrians and cyclists in the area. There has been 7 collisions in 5 years, and this includes 3 serious injuries to pedestrians and 1 serious injury to a cyclist. The scheme consists of upgrading the zebra crossing that's on site currently to a traffic light control puffing crossing, improving the footways at the junction of Harcourt Road and Oxford Street by installing sort of continuous pavement to sort of highlight the priority to pedestrians, and making part of Oxford Street one way so that no vehicle can turn into Oxford Street from Crookes Valley Road. Letters were sent to local residents and 9 responses were received, and there were 6 objections and 3 messages of support. The 6 objections were all regarding the one way on Oxford Street, and in summary were concerns about winter driving conditions, vehicle speeds and inconvenience. However, following consultation, we are now proposing that the scheme be amended so that there is a much shorter section of one way on Oxford Street, where there are no residential properties, so it's just a flat short section at the top. So this will allow two-way vehicle movements on Oxford Street where the houses are, so residents can come and go in the same way they would now. But we would still be addressing the collision history at that junction, which is vehicle turning in to the junction. So the report recommends that the committee considers the objections, approves the making of the TRO with the amended extents of Oxford Street, notes that the respondents to the consultation will be informed of the above decision, and approve the implementation of the Crookes Valley Local Safety Scheme subject to authorisation through the Capital Gateway process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susie, for taking us through that particular report. I can see 2 colleagues who wish to ask a question or make an intervention. Councillor Darnall and Councillor Mersrow.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks again for the report. Really welcome these measures, particularly the continuous footways, which will help enable people to walk and wheel safely in the area, and I'd like to see much more of across the city. I just had one question from colleagues in the ward, is about the one-way portion. So will cycles be able to cycle like contraflow to the traffic, and if so, is there going to be adequate signage to ensure that drivers know to expect bikes coming in the other direction?
So we've received this request, and actually what we've decided to do, because it's been quite recently, is that we're going to go through a road safety audit stage, and so what we're going to do is ask for the road safety auditor to review that request and then see if we can incorporate it into the scheme safely. So at the moment, we're just investigating it, and we can come back to you with the conclusions on that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, and Councillor Mersrow.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this report. The interventions to reduce road danger to people on foot and cycle are really welcome. Slight tangent, but it is related to reducing road danger in the Crookes Valley area. Crookes Valley Road itself is made up of 3 lanes and is long and straight, so it really enables speeding and dangerous driving. I'm wondering if there's any opportunity in future to build out the pavement or build a separate cycle lane on the Ponderosa Park side, and also to provide an extra crossing point nearer to the Mushroom Road end. I noticed in the walking, wheeling, cycling implementation plan report that the number of cyclist and pedestrian casualties was greatest where there's no physical crossing facilities within 50 metres, which is the case on this stretch.
Yes, thank you for that question, Councillor Mersrow. So, in terms of the scheme in front of you, clearly those aspects aren't included. It's concentrated on really where those kind of significant collisions have been occurring, and mitigation and measures to respond to that. In terms of future developments as part of the walking, wheel and cycling plan, clearly we've set out where those priorities could be. You're absolutely right that Crookes Valley Road is long, straight and wide. I think inbound to town there is a bus lane which runs along much of it, and that will be partly extended as part of this scheme. So I couldn't really kind of confirm what could be done in the future, but should we clearly be looking at areas of enhancement in this vicinity, then then clearly that would be the appropriate stage for us to give you more definitive views on that. In terms of the crossings, we will take that away in terms of Mushroom Road. I know that we have looked at that location previously, and we'll feed back to you on those issues, if that's okay.
Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Susie. Thank you, Tom, for the report. It's really welcome to see this the revised report that's taken feedback from residents on board, and that they've been able to accommodate that shorter one-way stretch. I'm particularly pleased to see the conversion of a zebra crossing to a fully signal control one, because I have had feedback and comments from local members, and also kind of my own experience from many years ago when I used to live in Walkley, of that crossing being particularly harder to see in that area. So changing it to a proper signalised crossing should, well, one hopes, will improve the safety for all road users in that area.
Thank you very much, Councillor Shaw. Can I just take another colleague's contribution if they wish to make it, and before going to officers for reflections? Councillor Diamond.
Apologies, it's a really short comment, but I just noticed in the legal implications that it's still referring to accidents rather than collisions, so just ask that would be updated.
Absolutely, and no doubt officers will agree, and thank you for picking those particular points up. Our language really does matter when we talk about Vision Zero and making our roads and streets safer. Just go to Councillor Campbell-Pugh and then go back for reflections.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we're just going through the same kind of points that you get raised each time we have one of these schemes put in front of us. So following the point about their collisions, not accidents, this might be a point for me to raise, and I won't raise it on any of the other local schemes, but it's really good to hear that we've got views that have been passed on from the local board members, but wouldn't it be great if we could find some mechanism within the governance structure of the authority to have devolved decision making to those people who are local and most familiar with the detail. I think the previous scheme, looking at the strategy across the whole city, is exactly the kind of thing that we should be spending our time talking about as a policy committee. But the detail of which stretch of road and how far things should extend, and how tall the lamppost should be, is best placed at a devolved local level, as I may have mentioned before, Chair.
I think you have, and it's a really interesting point that I can see that Councillor Sanger is nodding to. I think it's important that I also rehearse the same point that I made before as well, that whilst I agree with you, and it's that principle of subsidiarity, isn't it? It's also important that we balance that against kind of the need for us to deliver across the whole city as well. And sometimes, I guess, having that decision making at a ward level or LUC level is both extremely costly and time consuming for us to be able to do, and then has to be balanced against our needs to be able to deliver across the city. Now, I'm really mindful that actually people want us to deliver on active travel interventions, and that is the overarching and overriding goal that I have in the back of my mind. So those tensions do need exploring a little bit more, but I think you're entirely right to make it. It's something that Councillor Sanger has made over the years as well. I will just go to Tom and Susie for their reflections, and then also they come back to Councillor Diamond.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your kind of positive comments, Councillor Shaw. I think we wholeheartedly agree that this will be a significant improvement at this location in terms of particularly the crossing and the incidents that are arising from the current arrangements. The point is well made around kind of use of language. Committee does rightly pull us up on that, where sometimes we don't confine with the collisions, use of collisions and not accidents. I think we have learnt from that. The reference in paragraph 8.1 is a is a reflection of the Road Traffic Act 1988. So it is a statement from the Road Traffic Act 1988, and I think again that just reflects the use of language in 1988 compared to where we are today. So I don't think we will be able to change that, given that it is a quote from the Act, but hopefully elsewhere in the report, you know, Susie has done the kind of in line with everybody's expectations, including ours, referred to collisions and not accidents. And there is a knowledge briefing shortly after today's committee where we will start having a conversation around, in particular, how decisions on TROs of this nature and some of the 20-mile-per-hour schemes and WL Alliance are also on the agenda today, the alternative ways of making effective, efficient decisions around those that may ease some of the agenda burden for TRC committee. But that's a start to the conversation, but very much in line with your comments, Councillor Gamble-Pugh.
Are there any other reflections on some of the points that other colleagues have made as well? The use of language is really important, but I think other colleagues made a number of other points as well.
I think those are the main ones that I'd captured in my notes. So was there something else that you raised, Councillor Diamond?
I think that's okay, Tom. No doubt if we haven't been able to address some of the points that other colleagues have made, then perhaps they'll come back in the debate as well. Councillor Diamond.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come back a little bit on some of the comments that Councillor Gamble-Pugh made. Just in terms of, you know, I really think it's really important and vital that we inform and consult the ward members in the affected wards whether the interventions happen. But just a bit of caution, we do want to have integrated transport network. We don't want, as Councillor Sangal earlier said, like bits of cycle route that just abruptly comes to an end if it comes to a ward of a, you know, particularly regressive councillor. And we don't want like active travel deserts in the city. So I think it's really important that we do have an integrated and citywide vision, as we do have in terms of transport and policies which support that. And there would have to be, I fully support like adjustments and local knowledge informing the decisions, but I wouldn't like to jeopardise like the viability of the network.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Sanger.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, I just want to support Councillor Gamble-Pugh. It's really important that, yeah, under the current system that we do consult our colleagues and listen to the colleagues who do have a lot more knowledge, but the system was better when we had local decision making, and we can have local decision making again for many of these sort of schemes, the very local ones, the WL line schemes, this sort of traffic scheme. Clearly, like the previous report where we had a strategy, that clearly should be a matter for the committee, where it's a citywide strategy. And I accept what the chair has said in terms of finding a way to resource it is a challenge, but I welcome the fact that discussions are ongoing. We do need to keep all 84 councillors involved. Transport remains one of the biggest items in most of the 84 councillors' casework. You know, there's however many of us, you know, sitting around this table, 9, but we're here to represent all 84 of us. And I just think for the very localised, the very local decisions, if we can find a way of moving them down to lax, that would be a much better system, and it would clear up the space so we could make sure that we were doing the strategic decisions for the city, for transport, regeneration and for climate change. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sanger. Perhaps this is something that we can come back to as part of our regular knowledge briefings and discussions. I think it's a point of tension that we probably need to explore further. And I think it'd be really interesting to see what other authorities do on this particular issue. You know, I'm very mindful of that need for us to deliver on active travel right across our city, but no doubt those points that he makes very well are very important about making sure that local communities continue to be involved, but also local members as well. And in the past we've talked about how we do engagement as an authority and how we make sure that that function is strengthened. And that's certainly something that I'm very driven by. It's important if we're to move forward and deliver on various different improvement schemes, that we also bring as many people along with us on that journey as possible, and we do that by having really high quality engagement as well. Any final reflections, Susie or Tom? Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for bringing the reports today. I don't see any other colleagues who wish to make a point or ask a question, so therefore it moves us to consider the recommendations of the report, which are on page 55. Can I ask whether we are all agreed, and if we're not, then please raise your hand in dissent. I can see that colleagues are in agreement and that there's no one wishing their hand, raising a hand in dissent, so therefore that item on the Crookes Valley Road Local Safety Scheme, item 8, has therefore been passed and carried. Thank you very much, Susie, and Tom as well. That would move us on to item 9, but I wonder whether, in the interests of providing officers and colleagues with an opportunity to have a short comfort break, we might just take 2 minutes just for people to be able to grab a glass of water or use the toilet if they want to. So we might just pause our webcast and come back in 2 minutes, if that's okay. The meeting, we're on item 8, which is we're on item 9, which is the report on the objections to the proposed advertised TRO for double yellow lines at Longacre Way. It's on page 75 of the agenda pack. Now, colleagues will remember that at our last meeting, a wider number of TROs for double yellow lines was presented in an excellent report by Alex Redmond. There's one particular set of double yellow lines, which was on Longacre Way in the southeast of the city, where a business owner came in and made representations to the committee, explaining some of the concerns that he had and the likely impact on his business. As a result of that, the committee took the view that we would simply pause a decision on that particular item and move forward with the rest of the TROs for double yellow lines, and that would be subject to a site visit and subsequent officer recommendation. That site visit occurred. It involved myself, Councillor Horner and Councillor Downing as well. And before Tom Finnegan-Smith just very quickly goes over any particular points, because Alex Redmond can't be here with us today, I'm just going to turn to Councillor Horner, who might just reflect on that particular site visit, which I think took about an hour and a half, didn't it? And it felt like we learned quite a bit.
Thank you, Chair. We did indeed learn quite a bit. As I said at the last meeting, I wasn't objecting to double yellow lines per se, but just the point that because the Chair had said we'd visit the site and have a look, that it was right to pause the decision in order that we could do that visit. It's worth people looking at the map of the which I think is page 87, is it, of the actual scheme. So it says 87 on my screen, so that may not be right. It was a very useful visit because, first of all, the businesses either side, Excel Dance, which is on the left-hand side as you look at the screen, Excel Dance and Martial Arts and the gymnastics are a thriving business and really well supported locally. Informative.
Sorry, Councillor, we're just having a few microphone issues. Let's just check this just 1 second.
For some reason it can't.
Okay, let's just test it. I think it might just cut out.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, we can hear you. It's all working fine now. We had some gremlins, sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, so as I was, to go back to say, look at the map of the scheme. The two businesses, Excel, whom we'd heard from at the last committee, are an excellent and thriving business. They do have plans in the future to build, to improve their car parking, which might actually solve many of the problems. I did talk to some colleagues around about whether they could get any funding, which I'm not sure they can actually, but in the end that would solve the problem. But we also heard, which we didn't hear in committee from Hills Pumps, that they're a very innovative company. We found that fascinating, developing all sorts of pumps, and they export across to the EU, and so we heard about the impact of Brexit. They export to the US, and of course will be impacted by Donald Trump's tariffs. But that led us to a particular point. It was the managing director of Hills Pumps who made the point that they have to get lorries into that site, and that the parking impacts on that. And what I hadn't realised, I don't think any of us realised, that when a lorry arrives at a business like that, from the moment it arrives, in other words, from the moment it gets to the gates, that's when the loading time starts. So a shipping company charges for loading. If that lorry can't get into the premises, that's added to the loading time. So that costs businesses money. And it was particularly the people at Hills Pumps who drew our attention to the problems, and I think you may have seen the pictures that they provided of the problems they have of trying to get lorries in because of parent parking. It's also worth saying, something I said at the last meeting, if you look at this scheme, actually the bulk of these double yellow lines are places where people shouldn't park anyway. And when you look at it, there are two small parts of it where people currently could park that wouldn't be able to in the WR line. So people should not be parking on the junctions. They should not be parking in either of the entranceways, but they do. And that's the problem. So, and I did in fact on Monday raise again with the Oliver Coppard as in his role as Police and Crime Commissioner about the enforcement of dangerous parking, because what I said at the last committee, it is the case that we're paying to put WR lines in large part in places where people shouldn't be parking in the first place. And if dangerous parking was enforced properly by the police, because they have the power at the moment, or if councils were ultimately given the power, which they don't have at the moment to do that, we probably wouldn't need to do all these things. So, look, out of the result of all this is, I happily recommend this scheme. I do understand the concerns that people have, but essentially what's happening is that parents are not just dropping off kids, which might be the impression you're getting from some of the objections. They're then sitting in their cars for 45 minutes or whatever, while the children are having their lesson, and that's the problem. And it is having a major impact, and indeed, sadly, there's also an issue about, I'm sure it's a minority, but about the behaviour of some drivers, because the managing director of the pump said when his staff go out to try and move cars, to try and get lorries in, they have not exactly received a favourable reception. And I think, you know, that's something that generally I think we find in so many schemes at the moment, that people are parking thoughtlessly and then feel they have an entitlement to park there. Excuse me a second. I apologise. Also, what is perhaps not as clear on this scheme, if you look at the bottom, Longacre Way curves away, and when we actually stood there on the site, we could see that further down that there is not a good sight line. So you know, stopping people parking, when a lorry's got to come out, if a lorry wants to turn down Longacre Way, its sight lines are impacted as well. And also, while lorries are trying to get in and out of the business, they're blocking the road altogether. So I thought this was a useful visit. It certainly informed me about two local businesses that are on my ward boundaries, in fact, Althorpe Greenway, so it is in fact in Mosborough ward, which is why Councillor Downing was there. But look, you know, I think it was a useful visit, and I think I certainly will be voting for this scheme. I understand the parents' concerns, but in the end, the right way would be to develop the parking on the Excel site. But a major successful local business is badly impacted by this parking, so I recommend that we do it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Horner, for running us through what we learnt at that particular site visit. It's really, really appreciated. Tom, is there anything you'd like to particularly spotlight about this report that's been put together by Alex from an officer perspective?
Thank you, Chair. I think the kind of the context that you and Councillor Horner have provided is really useful in setting the scene for today's report. Just to confirm really to committee that the recommendation is now that the restrictions as originally advertised, which is for 85 metres of double line on both sides of the road, on the plan, as Councillor Horner has highlighted on page 87, so from the junction of Althorpe Way southbound to protect the junctions and accesses and to enable turning of large vehicles into those accesses is now the proposal in front of you, and we're recommending that that is today's decision, and we would then move forward alongside the wider suite of double yellow lines and the decisions that committee previously made as that package of double yellow lines to be implemented. Happy to take any further questions.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Councillor Horner. Do I have any contributions or questions from colleagues? I don't. It seems, therefore, that we're very satisfied, hopefully, with the site visit that occurred and also the overview that Tom Finnegan-Smith has provided. Do I therefore see that colleagues are content with approving this proposal, which is on page 679 of your agenda pack? If any member wishes to dissent, then please do raise your hand. I've seen no member wishing to dissent, and I've seen people nodding, so therefore this item has been carried. Item 9 on the report on the objections to the proposed TRO for double yellow lines at Longacre Way. Thank you very much, Tom, for taking us through it. Item 10 on our agenda is an opportunity for us to consider objections and concerns to the traffic regulation order, the TRO, for the connecting Sheffield city centre to Attercliffe and Darnall project. It's on page 103 of the agenda pack. I think Andrew Shearer is going to run us through it. And of course the report contains recommendations that's on page 105 of the agenda pack. Andrew, when you're giving us an overview, it'd be really helpful also if you could reflect on some of those comments and questions that came from the gentleman who asked a question originally in the area, and you might feel able to do so. I think it was Mr. James with regards to Norfolk Bridge Business Park off Foley Street as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So this report is the receipt of objections and concerns to the advertised traffic regulation order, which is required to meet the objectives of the connecting Sheffield city centre to Attercliffe and Darnall project. This project's been designed to support the regeneration of Attercliffe, Darnall and the Lower Don Valley by transforming sustainable access between the city centre, Attercliffe and Darnall through high quality active travel infrastructure and bus priority measures. The project also includes the removal of a redundant low railway bridge on Meadowhall Road to allow drivers of all HGVs to travel along Meadowhall Road and Brightside Lane instead of through Attercliffe when travelling to and from the city centre. If this report is approved, the TRO will replace existing TROs and introduce new TROs as necessary to implement waiting, loading and unloading restrictions, free, unrestricted and time-limited parking places, a bus lane, prohibition of motor vehicles, one-way restrictions, contraflow cycling, and prescribed ahead-only and left-turn movements, the removal of a bus gate, and a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit restriction as well. So there's quite a few TROs involved in order to implement this project, which is of a fairly significant scale. The details of all those TROs are included in the plans which are attached to this report as appendices A.1, 2 and A.3. In terms of the consultation,
for the traffic regulation order. This was undertaken between the 13th of February and 13th of March of this year. 18 people provided feedback, 11 people raised concerns or objected to the traffic regulation order. 3 people raised queries which officers have addressed, and 4 people supported the traffic regulation order and the project. The objections and concerns to the proposed traffic regulation order are broken down into 6 main categories in the report. These include parking restrictions, a bus lane, prohibited manoeuvres, road closures, a one-way restriction, and a general objection. These objections and concerns, along with officer feedback, are summarised within section 4 of this report, and a summary of the report for this traffic regulation order and project is also included. A copy, again, of all the objections and concerns, along with officer feedback and the queries and support for the project, are attached as Appendix B to this report. So, following the concerns regarding proposed double yellow lines on Roundel Street and the resulting loss of parking, it's been determined that it's possible to omit a small section of the proposed restrictions on the south side of Roundel Street to allow some on-street parking in this location, whilst not significantly impacting upon the proposed project. All of the TROs are required for the implementation of this project. This is an important and significant sustainable transport intervention which aims to transform sustainable access for residents and businesses. The benefits resulting from the implementation of the project are deemed on balance to outweigh the objections and concerns that have been raised against the proposed traffic regulation order, which is required in order to implement this project. It's therefore recommended that the committee consider the objections to the proposed traffic regulation order, authorise the making of the traffic regulation order with the following modification to the original proposal, which is that removal of a section of no waiting at any time, double yellow lines, parking restrictions on the south side of Roundel Street, and that all objectors are informed accordingly. That's the report in summary. Yeah, so just in terms of Foley Street and the access around there, so we had a number of objections to the proposed double yellow lines on that section, on Foley Street, on that section of the project. That was specifically around the loss of parking, and also some concerns around lorries that would be potentially queuing to access the business park off Foley Street. There was no specific objection at the time regarding the layout of the scheme, the proposed design for the segregated cycle route, and the impact that would have on turning movements in and out of the business park. That's come subsequently to colleagues, to the team. So as we've agreed, we will investigate that further and work with the businesses to come up with an appropriate solution to address concerns over turning manoeuvres, and hopefully come up with an appropriate solution which still allows us to implement the active travel infrastructure that's required, but also accommodates all those turning movements in and out for all sizes of vehicles in and out of that business park.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your reflections on the Foley Street issue that the business owner raised before. With regards to that particular issue, would it be possible, I'm mindful that Clive Betts, the local MP, is due to visit the site on Friday with the business owner, just to give him a brief email over the next day or so on the issue with a bit of an overview, and particularly, I guess, that explanation of the fact that these are new issues that weren't raised as part of the consultation by businesses, but that, like you said, we're willing to listen, we're willing to find a solution and work with the business. It'd be useful if he was aware of that before he had that meeting with the business on Friday. I can see that you're nodding, and I'm very happy to do that, so thank you very much. Do I see any questions or contributions from colleagues? Councillor Mercereau.
Thank you. Thanks very much for all the work that's gone into this report. It's really welcome, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the proposed changes here. The mobility route, the speed reduction and the bus improvement are all really welcome. I do have concerns about the reduction in parking spaces that are being removed, and they might dilute the effectiveness of the mobility route. And I have a couple of comments on specific aspects. I'm wondering if this, I'm sure you've addressed this already, but is the staff parking available within the Stanford Road depot for council workers? And could we offer to help with sustainable alternatives to Sheffield Council staff at this depot? And on a side issue, further up at Coleridge Road, the existing restrictions on no loading are regularly ignored, with coaches pulled up on that section, which blocks visibility for people crossing between EIS and Sheffield, which is really dangerous as it's used a lot by disabled people, young people and older adults. Can any action be taken on this to enforce properly? So section 4.217, the alternative route for cyclists across Derek Dooley Way is really welcome, but the light timings at this crossing are really slow to cross Derek Dooley Way. Can these be altered to prioritise people on bikes crossing here? There's currently an issue with a section of Five Weirs Walk next to Coldwell Bridge, which is meaning that a lot of people aren't really wanting to take that as an alternative route. And my concern about the effectiveness of the scheme if parking restrictions aren't properly enforced. I noticed that last year only 56 PCNs were issued in the whole of last year on the whole of Attercliffe Road, which is an average of 1 PCN per week. There's dozens of vehicles parked every day in contravention, so I'm curious to know why there hasn't been more enforcement already. And Objective 15 on page 182 makes similar points, so I'm wondering why there hasn't been more enforcement. I'm concerned that there won't be sufficient enforcement to make the scheme properly viable. And that's all from me, thank you.
Thank you very much. Ruth, Tom and Andrew, are you able to reflect on those points?
Yeah, so with regards to the reduction in the double yellow lines originally proposed on Brownell Street, that was assessed by the designer, and they didn't feel that there was any significant impact that would result from that relatively small reduction in the length of double yellow lines. The purpose of the double yellow lines on that section is to facilitate the space effectively for vehicles and cyclists to path as one of the feeder routes that we have down towards the main route that runs along Attercliffe Road and Attercliffe Common. So whilst that provides a little bit more parking, you're right, for employees of Stanford Road Transport Services Depot that is used in part by those employees, it shouldn't have any sort of detrimental impact on the cycle route itself or the facility that we're providing. There's no physical segregated facilities provided on Randall Street because it's effectively a cul-de-sac. This is just a feeder route, which is effectively a low traffic route, which will the WL lines will help to facilitate that provide the space to facilitate vehicles and cyclists passing. So it shouldn't be a disadvantage or an issue to reduce that length at that point, whilst it still provides some parking for people on that street. In terms of employees got parking inside the depot itself, I think some do, I think some don't. It depends on the employees, and I believe that it depends on the people that are working there and what types of services they're providing in the depot as to whether there's parking spaces available in there. So you're right, some do park within there, but some also park on some of the surrounding roads when they're attending work. In terms of Coleridge Road, and I think that was the issue around enforcement of double yellow lines on that road. I think, and this goes you've obviously flagged up in other areas of Attercliffe as well, that enforcement that is limited by the resources that are available to parking services, and obviously they have a priority list of areas and routes for their officers to use or to patrol. It's something we can certainly flag up with them and determine if they can do some sort of operation or whether they can do some sort of enhanced enforcement around that area if there's a particular issue, and if there's particular times as well, that would be quite useful to provide to them as well. But that's something we can pass on to them and find out if they can do some improved enforcement down there. Yeah, in terms of the main route through Attercliffe, although there was no objections to this, we did outline in the report the proposal in the project to introduce a red route through Attercliffe. So that's effectively down the main road through Attercliffe, Attercliffe Road, Attercliffe Common, and up a section of Worksop Road as well. So one of the main purposes of a red route is to enhance the enforcement of illegal parking, loading and unloading. So that a red route permits enforcement through cameras rather than actual officers having to physically patrol the route. So it's a much more effective enforcement technique. It's the main road through Attercliffe is already has no waiting any times or yellow lines throughout its length, and has no loading and unloading on sections as well, and sometimes peak hour loading and unloading as well. So whilst the red route is effectively a no stopping restriction, there is already double yellow lines throughout that section, so it's really helping to enforce the restrictions that are already in place, and it's really required to ensure that the cycle route operates effectively, because if we have significant numbers, as you've suggested, of illegal parking along that main route, it will render the cycle route at times it render it not particularly effective to use, and obviously cyclists would have to get off the bike or try and cycle around parked cars if they were to park in the cycle route. So this would provide a much more effective means of enforcement for the route and make it a much more effective scheme overall. In terms of Derek Dooley Way, the junction itself is being remodelled, and as part of that there will be a separate cycle and pedestrian crossing, and the timings for that will all be to the advantage of pedestrians and cyclists. So it will all be adequate timings to allow cyclists and pedestrians to cross. And I think in terms of the waiting times as well, I think something that we do promote in Sheffield is to have that response in terms of allowing, in terms of the red time for drivers once the button's pressed, is to come around as soon as possible, so to provide as much advantage in terms of timing as we can for pedestrians and cyclists, whilst managing obviously the flow of traffic on the network overall. But it'll certainly be an upgraded crossing with better timings to cross that section of road. It's obviously a key part of the route there, leading from the Grey to Green scheme out towards Attercliffe, Effingham and Attercliffe. So it's a really important crossing point, and that whole junction area, Furnivall Road and Derek Dooley Way, will be remodelled to accommodate the cycle route.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Diamond.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for this report. And again, really welcome it. I think it's looks like it's going to be a brilliant scheme, offering the potential for much more sustainable and healthy neighbourhood. It'll be benefiting residents and visitors and enabling people to commute and visit the city centre from Darnall, Attercliffe through active travel and public transport. I think the new, mainly segregated cycle route between the city centre will, as well as the new pedestrian enhancements, will address many of the barriers to walking, wheeling and cycling in the area that were identified in the earlier report. So that'll be brilliant. I think bus priority red routes will make these options and public transport far more attractive and viable, and will hopefully demonstrate the value of these to residents in other parts of the city. Just wanted to check that the red route cameras will catch sort of pavement parking as well, i.e. like the whole width of the highway. I'm pretty sure it should do. I do think the equality impact assessment again understates the potential benefits of the scheme, in my opinion. I did want to ask parking services whether they felt that they would have the resources to enforce the additional restrictions. So it's unfortunate that the colleagues are not, still here. And so I also wanted to reflect on the green permits decision and hopefully and also the parking task and finish group, which will hopefully help with this in terms of them having the resources and being empowered to do that. And I agree with Ruth's point about incentivising alternative forms of transport for Sheffield City Council employees, because this scheme should empower everyone to use more sustainable forms of transport, including our employees. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alexi. Andrew and Tom, are there any reflections on that particular point?
Yeah, you're right. Just in terms of the red route, the restriction applies to the carriageway, so the road itself, the footway, and any verges as well. So it's from one side of the highway boundary all the way across to the other. So any pavement parking can be enforced through cameras, as well as either parking on the road itself or parking in the cycleway. That would all be covered with enforcement cameras.
Thank you very much. Do I see any other colleagues who wish to make another contribution? I don't. I will just come back to Tom in a second after we've just made a decision about this, because I think he might want to say something to the committee. In fact, perhaps I might go to Tom now, because I think Councillor Shaw has to leave because he's got another engagement and he's informed me of that. Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And thank you for your kind words from other committee members earlier. I just wanted to say a personal thank you to committee myself. It's been a privilege working for the City Council for the last 9 years as somebody who grew up in London, to parents from Sheffield and extended family from Sheffield, and as a classic transport nerd. It's been fantastic to serve the city and to work with you and have your positive challenge at times to the work we do, but you know, I just want to say a massive thank you. It's been great working with you, and as you mentioned earlier, Councillor Miscall, some of that will continue in my new role at South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We're all really appreciative of the contribution that you've made as Chief Transport Nerd of the city, and moving on to be a Chief Transport Nerd in the region as well, and helping us. So thank you so much for a decade of success. Really appreciate it. Okay, so that therefore moves us on to the decision of this particular item. Which is item 10 on the agenda. Now, the recommendations for committee's consideration and potentially approval are on 105 of your report pack. Do I see that colleagues are content with us approving this particular item? And if you wish to dissent, then please raise your hand. Colleagues are content with us approving this particular item, so that therefore has been carried. So thank you very much, Andrew, supported by Tom, for running us through this particular item. It's very much appreciated. That therefore moves us on to the next item, but before we do that, I just need to ask colleagues whether they're minded to extend the guillotine of our meeting. I think we'd say up to half an hour, is that correct?
Yeah, opportunity for 2 extensions of half an hour each.
Okay, so I'm asking members whether they're content with us extending the guillotine on our meeting for half an hour. I'm seeing that the colleagues are content with that. So therefore we'll move on to item 11, which is an update on the advanced zoning programme. Now, Catherine is going to be introducing it and taking us through it. It's on page 197 of the agenda pack. I think probably before Catherine introduces it, I think it's probably important to say for anyone who might be reading the agenda or watching remotely, the title of the report perhaps is one that is set by central government. It's part of a wider programme, isn't it, and not necessarily our officers, and therefore perhaps doesn't necessarily reflect the scale of what this could mean for Sheffield. And Catherine is doing an excellent job at leading this work for us, and we'll go into much more detail in a second. But I think it's probably important for me to say, because of the ambiguity of the title, that this is a particular part of our growth plan. Heat networks are identified as being a key infrastructure and investment priority for us as a city in delivering a clean and inclusive growth. So it's really timely that this is coming to our committee today, because it's something that we as a committee want to move forward on at pace. And I think it's probably important to say, and Catherine will probably reflect on it shortly, but we should be incredibly proud as a city. Sheffield's one of a handful of trailblazer cities leading the way when it comes to heat networks. And I think across the UK, that leadership really, really matters. And we're all really excited here as committee members about the potential that this brings to bring about lower cost, energy for homes, public buildings and businesses, really. So Catherine, we're looking forward to your paper, and thanks very much for the leadership that you show at an officer level in bringing it forward as well and taking us to this next stage in the process.
Okay, thanks Chair, and thanks for that introduction. Hopefully by the time I've finished running through the report, that ambiguity around the title will be addressed for everybody in the room and watching online. So yeah, I've come today to run through the report, which gives an update on the heat network zoning regulations, the advanced zoning programme, which I might here on in refer to it as AZP just for speed, and gives an update on that, and along with an update on a grant application we've recently made to the Green Heat Network Fund, and it takes us through to the next steps and ultimately asking this committee's approval to move through to the next stage of the programme through to procurement. So in terms of setting the background, so heat networks essentially supply heat from a centralised energy centre, supplies that heat through a network of underground pipes and reduces the need for buildings to have individual boilers. So this creates quite a lot of efficiencies in heat systems, and the technology is also technology agnostic, so it can take in heat sources from sort of low carbon sources and waste heat as well. So also addresses our decarbonisation targets. The Climate Change Committee have previously said that for the UK to meet its net zero target by 2050, the country needs to be getting about 20% of its heat from heat networks from the current level of about 2%. So quite a way to go. But in Sheffield, we're in a good starting position. We've got a network in the city centre that serves about 130 buildings. It's served from the Veolia Energy Recovery Facility. Over in, excuse me, in the east of the city, E.ON own and operate their own heat network, which is powered by their biomass combined heat and power plant at Blackburn Meadows. Also, as a council, quite a lot of our housing, social housing, is served by communal sort of heat systems. So we have 140 that serve just shy of 6,000 of our housing properties as well. So there's over the past, there's been barriers to the uptake of district heat network, and that's largely come from the fact it is very large infrastructure projects which come with high capital costs, and that presents barriers to investment decisions when there's not always that guarantee that operators and developers are going to get the customers at the end of it. So to address this barrier, back in 2020, the then government energy white paper introduced the concept of heat network zoning, which is essentially designating a geographical area within which it's deemed heat networks can provide the lowest cost route to heat decarbonisation. At that time, so that was sort of 2020, come 2021 in the autumn, the Department for Energy, Security and Net Zero launched their sort of first consultation on this, and around that same time, Sheffield were invited to be part of a pilot programme. And that pilot programme, there was 27 other towns and cities involved in that one. That was very much about helping the government understand how they can identify where these heat network zones may be. And in figure 1 of your report, there's an initial outputs map that indicates that potentially in Sheffield, over time, there could be 14 zones that are designated once the legislation comes in. So the primary legislation for heat network zoning is set within the Energy Act 2023, and as things stand at the moment, government is currently working through the secondary legislation, and that's due to come out, we understand, sort of later this year, early in 2026. The last consultation that Department for Energy ran was last winter, so closed in February 2024, and we're expecting the consultation response on that to come out imminently. We're hearing spring. So when I'm talking through the report and in the report, when there's mention of what we think the legislation is going to look like, it is obviously subject to change. So some things I say, it's not absolutely concrete, and we're waiting for kind of confirmation on some of these things. So following the sorry, I'm just going to take a step back a sec just before I move on. And this isn't the purpose of this report, but it is mentioned within the report that one of the other things as part of the heat network zoning regulations is the different roles that central government and local government are going to be required to take. And it's mooted within the documentation as we understand it at the moment that local authorities will take on a role of zoning coordinator. Now, it may not be every tier of local authority. In some areas, it could be at a mayoral combined authority level, it could be the unitary authority. And that's still all to be determined. We're expecting that with us being one of these trailblazing cities, that it is likely to be Sheffield in this case, and we're happy for that. We see major opportunities in that. But again, the full detail on that is not yet known, and we have been having conversations with colleagues in Department for Energy about what that sort of target operating model is going to look like and what roles and responsibilities will be coming down to local authority to fulfil that role, and we'll be sharing that with yourselves once more information is known on that. So following that pilot programme that I mentioned, we were then invited by government to take part in their advanced zoning programme, so the AZP programme. And this was ultimately to work with authority areas that, like us, either had existing networks or had already done quite a lot of work to start developing networks in their area, with the idea being that there were a programme of projects that potentially could come through imminently soon after the legislation coming into effect. So it was, trying to stimulate the market, to signal to the market that these big infrastructure projects coming, so gearing up the skills and supply chain that's needed. It was to build capacity within local authorities for once the legislation comes into effect, so that there's that skills and knowledge that we can then also share with other neighbouring authorities. And also for government to learn, to help inform their policy decisions as well, and how that policy is taking shape. So in Sheffield, the initial phase of the advanced zoning programme primarily focused on the sort of city centre, Lower Don Valley area of the city. So again, looking at your map in figure 1, identifies quite a large, what could potentially be a strategic heat network zone due to the scale of the heat density in that area, and also the heat sources in that area as well that could be capitalised upon. So in that initial phase, that sort of indicated that potentially there could be up to 1,800 buildings that would be required to connect under how we thought at the time the legislation was going to pan out, with a combined heat demand of 1,100 gigawatt hours a year. The advanced zoning programme itself ultimately aims to identify projects that have a minimum heat demand of 50 gigawatt hours, and ultimately can sort of aim to commence delivery by December 26, so quite tight timescales. So we've been working with Department for Energy and Net Zero appointed consultants on this since early in 2023. And last October, we were announced, as the Chair commented on earlier, one of 6 cities to be given kind of prioritised support to see our projects through to procurement and delivery. So since October, we've had technical consultants that have been appointed by the government working with us on this. And they've identified what's referred to as the Advanced Zoning Programme Reference Project, which in our case looks at connecting 159 buildings with a total heat demand of 64 gigawatt hours a year. And that would require about 16 kilometres of pipe work to serve those buildings. There's a variety of heat sources, so that's, again, that reference project is indicated in figure 2 of your report. The heat sources that have been explored that could potentially serve that network are the sort of existing large heat sources in the city, so the energy recovery facility, E.ON's biomass combined heat power plant, looking at other alternatives, so such as air source heat pump, industrial waste heat recovery, and other sort of low carbon heat sources as well. That project has an estimated construction cost of £76 million. So as part of this programme, other colleagues in Department for Energy have been working on different routes to market for the Advanced Zoning Programme project, so that there are legally compliant routes that we can procure projects as part of the AZP. So the first option is around a development agreement only approach, and under this delivery model, a development partner is procured to design and develop the project up until the point it's ready to be built. At that point, both parties, so ourselves as the promoter of the project and the developer, would both decide whether the project's viable and whether to proceed or not. And at that point, any kind of contractual relationship between ourselves and the developer would end at that point. Under that model, there's no capital input that would be required from the council, so no financial risk and no resource required through the operational stage of the project. The second route to market was the same as that, so a development agreement approach, but with a golden share agreement. So this is the same as I've just outlined, but under this approach, a contractual relationship would continue once the project's been approved to proceed, and the parties would enter into a shareholders agreement under which the council would have a golden share, which would allow a certain amount of oversight into the operational stage of the project, and allows kind of decisions to be monitored but without the council having direct liability for the delivery of outputs. The third route to market was a development agreement with a co-investment shareholders agreement. So this is similar to what I've just outlined, but under this route, the council would have financial input into the development and into the special purpose vehicle that's been developed to deliver the project. That particular route to market has been discounted on the basis that it requires upfront capital investment from the local authority and quite a significant amount of resource going forward through the operational stage of the project. So, subject to this committee's approval following this item to proceed through to the next stage of the programme, we'd be working with financial and legal and commercial appointed consultants that Department for Energy have procured and financed for us to really work through which is the best approach for Sheffield City Council, whether it be the development agreement approach only or the development agreement with the golden share. Also trying to navigate that with how we think the role of the zoning coordinator is going to pan out as well, and how having a contractual relationship with a developer might interact with us also having that statutory oversight and regulatory role as well through the zoning coordinator. So the procurement itself is the procurement for the reference project. That's the 159 buildings, 64 gigawatt hours of heat demand. But one of the things we also need to agree through the next phase is what the potential wider area zonal opportunity would be. So again, to labour the point, this is an advanced zoning programme. So this is looking at that total zonal opportunity for the city. So one of the things that we'd be working on over the next couple of months is actually really drawing that kind of boundary around where we think that opportunity is. So the bidders would be bidding for the reference project, but they would also, through the commercialisation stage, have to be delivering a sort of high-level master plan on how they could develop and deliver that wider zonal area opportunity. So under both the development agreement only and the development agreement with golden share route to market, there's no financial input from the local authority in terms of the capital investment. So how will the project be funded? So the techno-economic modelling that was done as part of the outline business case that's been prepared on behalf of Department for Energy, Security and Net Zero was basically based on an equity injection by the development partner, income from connection costs, and also a small amount of government grant. So as part of the Advanced Zoning programme, we've very recently, the consultants that we've been working with in coordination with ourselves, prepared a funding bid to the Green Heat Network Fund, which is government grant funding to support the commercialisation and construction of heat networks. Our bid has been submitted for £10 million. That's £1 million of commercialisation fee, which would help fund the initial stage of the development commercialisation process, and £9 million towards the construction costs. If we're successful with that application, we would enter into the memorandum of understanding with the funder in the first instance. Once that developer is appointed, the remaining of the grant and the construction part of the grant would be passported through to them, and then they would enter into their own direct grant agreement with the funder. So they would then become fully responsible for all the grant conditions of that. So in terms of kind of timescales and next steps, So, as I said, the outline business case has just been submitted to the Department for Energy and Net Zero. Here today to seek approval to move through to the next stage, with the intention that over the next sort of coming couple of months, we'll be working through all the procurement documents, working on the commercialisation, determining which route to market we're going to take, with the view that we issue an invitations tender in July this year, and with a developer being appointed by December 2025. The developer will then have 12 months to commercialise that project in line with the government's timescales that we've been given. So just in conclusion then, we feel this programme really supports the decarbonisation efforts of the city. It very much aligns with a lot of the objectives in the decarbonisation route map and the growth plan, and the sort of continued support that's fully funded through Department for Energy. I think, to echo the Chair's points earlier, really kind of put Sheffield at the forefront of heat networks and preparing us for the zoning regulations once they come into effect. So just in terms of our ASA committee, we're asking you to note the update that's been presented today and in the report, note that an application has been submitted to the Green Heat Network Fund, and if successful, to approve that we accept that, to delegate the finalised acceptance of that and the signing off of the Memorandum of Understanding to the Director of Investment, Climate Change and Planning, that approval is given to commence through to the next stage of the Advanced Zoning Programme and to proceed through to procurement, and that delegated authority is given to the Director of Investment, Climate Change and Planning to determine that final procurement route. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine, for going through that, but also for going through the recommendations and helping add even further clarity and life to this particular item, which we know is really important. You can see Councillor Gamble-Pugh and then Councillor Mersrow. I'll take both and then go for reflections to Catherine and then go to Councillor Sanger. Councillor Gamble-Pugh.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Catherine, and thanks for all the work that officers have done to put this together. It's really good to see at the top line of the report we're talking about the language of pace and scale. I think we've heard a couple of times today on different items about we want to do more and more quickly. So we really kind of support you in anything we can do to help push forward on this. I'm sure we would support. My questions are just in terms of, obviously we've got the combined heat and power network at the minute in Sheffield, but the amount of waste that can be incinerated, should be incinerated, is finite, and it's also, there is some controversy attached to it. And I just wanted to check, will the zoning and the expansion of the network for this, I mean, it's potentially exceptionally exciting because it's increasing the amount of non-carbon based heat that can be delivered to more zones of properties through the city. So that's potentially an incredibly positive thing. But will it be done in a way where the heat source can come in the future from other non-incinerator based sources? Would that include renewables? Could that include waste heat, i.e. heat from servers and industrial processes rather than heat from incineration of waste heat? And then also, second kind of point, you talked about how from December a contractor would need to commercialise the model. I think when we talk about alternative energy sources and alternative heat sources, we also think about community ownership of those schemes and ways that the commercialisation, if you like, kind of bringing in money can then be reinvested back into communities and back into further means of achieving our net zero goals. So is there any scope for that kind of community ownership, generation of non-profit income streams? Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. I'll just go back to you because there's quite a few different points to Councillor Gamble-Pugh's question. I guess there was that question about whether heat can come from other, even more sustainable sources as well. And no doubt the answer will be yes in the longer term. And also about the involvement of community energy and how that can play a part.
Okay, thank you. So yes, in answer to your first question, so with heat networks, the heat source is agnostic, so it can come from multiple sources. So obviously bearing in mind that we know, we want to be reducing the waste that's sent for disposal as its final route, but I think ultimately so obviously the contract we have at the moment with Veolia that runs until 2038, so there needs, whatever developer is appointed, in terms of the heat sources, they're going to have to be really sort of thinking these through in terms of the long-term viability of those heat sources. The techno-economic modelling was based on a heat source from those large sort of heat sources, but also with air source heat pump, and part of that looked at sort of locations for energy centre, locations for air source heat pumps. And I'm sorry, I did forget to mention this when I was running through the report, but through the heat network zoning regulations, what's also proposed is that not only will buildings be required to connect to a heat network, waste heat sources or heat sources will also be required to connect. So this, as you say, it could be like heat pumps, it could be mine water, it could be the wastewater treatment works. So there will be legislation coming through as well that would really be supporting the connections of those heat sources into networks, and that's what's going to help further decarbonise our heat as well. So hopefully that's answered that question. The next question in terms of the community ownership, yeah, so in terms of techno-economic modelling, it wasn't included as part of that. I think it will probably be for the developer to really think through how they're going to finance it, and it could be that that's part of the social value element of any procurement, that we want to see some element of community ownership. Interestingly, as part of the advanced zoning programme, so the city participants have been engaged in these market engagement sessions that Department for Energy Security and Net Zero have organised. Sheffield presented back in their January one, I think, and since then I did actually have somebody, and that's basically for the market to attend, so they're getting an idea of what projects are coming through, so they can start gearing up for them and thinking whether they might be interested in them. But I did actually have somebody contacted me as a result of that, who was more from sort of the community energy sector, about sort of community energy sort of fundraising. So I think that there is definitely interest in that. I think just the other thing to note, that I think it only got launched this week actually. Department for Energy are currently consulting on their proposals for the community benefits of heat networks in... Has my mic cut out then? There is government policy that obviously wants to enable community benefits that are hosting big energy infrastructure. So the consultation is basically looking at where there's heat networks going in as part of zoning, what are the community benefits that are going to be seen in those areas? So is it around skills, jobs, physical improvements? And this is something that as officers we're really keen that we get this out of zoning. This isn't just about decarbonisation, it is about all those wider code benefits as well, that's what we want to see for our city. And the other element of that consultation that's gone out, it only closes on the 21st of May, is around where heat network operators have any windfall profits that come in as a result of the project, how they're then shared with the customers on that network as well. There is other work outside of zoning and heat networks where we are very much looking at community-owned infrastructure as well. So very, very mindful of it. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Do I see any other colleagues who wish to make a contribution or ask a question? Councillor Mersero.
Thank you, and thanks very much for all the work that's gone into the report. I was really pleased to hear you say that we can use cleaner sources of energy and renewals in future, because I'd comment that now we no longer have coal-fired power stations, that burning rubbish at waste plants is now the most polluting form of energy that we have. Quick question. Can I get reassurance or clarification that new properties in the heat network areas won't get a gas supply so as to prevent them from opting into fossil fuels?
Sorry. So in terms of the policy around gas, new homes with or buildings with gas boilers, I'm not totally up to speed with that. In terms of the proposed heat network zoning legislation, the way it was worded in the previous consultation is that once a heat network zone has been designated and that designation follows a formal consultation process within the local area, any new developments that are go through the planning process after the point of mandate of the designation of the zone would be required to connect to the zone. That would be for any new developments as it was proposed. So where there are existing buildings within a mandated zone, they would be required to connect if they met certain criteria, which is still to be determined. But we think that for like non-domestic buildings, it would be buildings that consume over 100 megawatt hours a year of heat. It could be, for example, some of our social housing that's served on the localised district heat networks that are currently on a gas boiler. If they're in the vicinity of a network or a new network as part of zoning, they would be required to connect and take their bulk heat from that larger network. It wouldn't be for individual dwellings as we understand it at this time. But yes, certainly as we understand it from the consultation last year, once a zone is designated, new developments that go through the planning system would be required to connect. So long as there's a network there. Obviously the network wasn't planned to be built till 10 years ahead, but then hopefully there's other policies that would support not putting the gas boiler in.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sanger.
Thank you, Chair. And I think this is a really exciting report, really good update. Thanks to Catherine and the other officers for the work so far. You know, heat networks do allow changes at scale, and you know we're talking about moving to a zero carbon world, a zero carbon city. So really pleased that Sheffield continues to take the lead on this. Really glad we're working with government, able to draw down some, putting in some bids to get some money from government. But also I think we need to remember why we're in this place, and that's because of the the work of councillors in this city in the going back to the 70s. And if Alf Mead was here, he would he would be really excited by this, that we're building on his legacy. So also the legacy of the support in terms of the current energy recovery facility, but also E.ON in terms of their biomass their biomass network. So it's building on all that, but as we said, this is about other opportunities about other waste heat. So we're mentioning Forge Masters. We're also mentioning the opportunities of using the old mine workings in the southeast of the city. So really exciting opportunity to make a real difference. So hope we can continue to be part of the pilot and pushing this forward, because it will make a real difference to the city. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other colleagues who wish to ask a question or make an intervention. I'll just go to Catherine for any final remarks that she might wish to make. And thank you so much for bringing the paper today and the leadership that you show at an officer level on this particular item, and the depth of knowledge and experience that you have on it.
Thanks, Chair. I don't really have any sort of further comments to make, but obviously just really thank you for your time this afternoon. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Catherine, and we'll look forward to receiving updates as you come to see us at our knowledge briefings about the progress on the programme as well, so thank you. Do I see that colleagues are content with approving this particular item, and the recommendations are on page 199? Please stick your hand up to dissent if you are not content, but I'm seeing that people are nodding, and therefore that item has been carried. So that's item 11, on the advanced zoning programme, and its recommendations on page 199. Thank you very much, Catherine. It's really appreciated. To make colleagues aware, we're now a little bit double booked with a knowledge briefing that's due to happen in Howden House. I've sent an email to officers who are at that meeting just to make them aware that we're running a little bit late, and that we'll hopefully meet them, if you can make it, at 1:30. So that therefore takes us on to our final item today, and apologies to Alan and Lucia in the Regen team from the Capital Delivery Service for having to wait until the very end of our meeting. It's item 12, which is the Gateway to Sheffield Castle site project that has received support from UK government funding. And Lucia and Alan are bringing us a very timely update, especially as we are all very excited about some of the archaeological finds that have been brought forward and that we've discovered, and that's resulted in some changes to the overall programme in order to protect those archaeological finds, as I understand it. But Lucia and Alan are going to give us a little bit of an update. But Counsel Sanger?
Sorry, Chair, sorry to be terribly procedural, but we do need to extend this meeting by 15 minutes or whatever to hear this report.
Yes, I think you're very right. Should we extend the meeting? I think we cannot extend it up to half an hour. I don't think we'll need that time, but just so that we don't have to come back for any changes. People minded to accept that for half an hour. Thank you, Councillor Sanger. And apologies, Lucia and Alan. We'll look forward to hearing from you now.
Thank you, Chair. With the reports in your packs, we've got a presentation to run you through the report, which hopefully will be informative and helpful. You'll see it, we'll run through that presentation and we'll take questions at the end if you've got any.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here today. I haven't been in the chamber for a few years. I will take you through the progress of the Castle project, but also I hope to give you a little bit of a story and some nice pictures of how a medieval castle became a thriving and industrial city in the north of England. The photo you can see on your left is quite a romanticised picture of, a fairly recent picture of what Sheffield Castle might have looked like. It was one of the largest castles in the north of England, but we have got no pictures and no final details what it looked like. The picture on the right is a visual I come back to on what the new castle part will look like. And of course, Vulcan has left a hammer and spear for a health and safety helmet and a shovel to help complete the castle park, so we will need as much help as possible. The story starts in Castlegate. We all know Castlegate is an area in the city centre. The area has some issues, current issues in terms of the effects of the retail retreating. We have a lot of vacant land and buildings, and we have some antisocial issues with antisocial behaviour. But as you will see from my slide, the opportunities well outweigh, those issues. So we have, we have an area which in the 19th and 20th century was the place to be in the city centre. This is where the law courts, local government, the markets, where you went for a drink, and a dance. And that has left a lot of really beautiful buildings in the area. We also have a lot of the city centre hotels, 5 of the main city centre hotels are in and around Castlegate and Victoria Quays. It is a very well connected area of the city centre, a place to experiment and innovate, and the Sheffield Innovation Spine is looking at that. A lot of potential in terms of adding to the housing needs of the city is where we implemented grey to green and provided the right setting for regeneration of the city. And of course the new park will provide a place-making catalyst in terms of economic, environmental and social elements. I could have shown you some examples of regeneration across other parts of England and internationally, but I've chosen to show you some examples in Sheffield because Kellam Island, which was voted the place to live by The Guardian a few years ago, is an area based around heritage and how that has been so successful. Grey to Green has brought a lot of happiness to people living and working around the area, but also it's brought a lot of investment. And some of those beautiful buildings I was telling you about, I have a picture of the old town hall, but it didn't fit in, so it came out. So this is what the site looks like, not at the moment, but when we started. So best described as a sea of concrete, not much more. It isn't a flat site, and that is one of the issues that has led to the very complex redesign issues and impacted by the Sheffield Blitz. So some of the archaeology went as well as some beautiful buildings. The most recent use was as part of Castle Markets, which you can see at the bottom. And the top right-hand corner, you can see this is the latest model. This is what Sheffield University Archaeology thinks the castle looked like. The gatehouse was fronting onto Exchange Street. We went out to public consultation at the end of 2022. This is the master plan. Again, it's not flat. I will show you some of the levels later on. But the master plan key concepts are a significant event space in what used to be the bowling green. We will have the sheaf field next to the coveted river sheaf, and we will have archaeology and show archaeology throughout the site, but most importantly, towards the southern part of the site around the gatehouse and the drawbridge. There is also a number of development plots that will be enabled by the project. Trying to do this quickly. So that master plan is not accurate in a very important area, I think, and I wanted to show this separately, and that is that there will be a little bit of a terraced area not a little bit, but about a third of the sheaf field will have a terraced area overlooking the river sheaf. It will look very similar to what Matilda Street Pocket Parks looks like. You can see some of the terracing detail, and on the right-hand side, we have got a stupendous fish pass, which has now been approved by the National Fish Pass panel, and we hope salmon will be able to start coming up onto the sheaf from the Don. These are some of the images I was telling you about. So these are some of the 3D. On the top left-hand corner, you can see some of the buildings in the central part of the area as well around it. You can also see the new drawbridge and the entrance from Exchange Street on the bottom picture. And you can see that what is the wall on Castlegate remains. So when you come up into the park from Castlegate, it'll be flat level with the street, and it goes up to 8 meters onto Waingate. And to the left, you have the sheaf field, and to the right, you have the event space. Nearing Exchange Street is the main part of the archaeology, the gatehouse, and then you can see that building on the top of the site, and that is the upper tower, which will remain locked indoors. Going into the project that we're working on, the vision is rethinking Castlegate as again being a thriving part of the city centre. We have a successful Levelling Up Fund application in October 2021, and the current budget is £21 million. That is made up of LOF, SIMCA, Environment Agency, and Prosperity Fund. Oreos, formerly Kelbray, were appointed in October 2023. Work started on site in July 2024. We have fantastic engagement with stakeholders. We have really keen, interested people who are working with us to get this delivered, as well as the Castlegate Partnership and the Castlegate Area Board. It is a difficult and constrained site. Works to date have focused on archaeology, the coveting, surveys, undertaking and changing levels, utilities and drainage. We have a very exciting amount of archaeology discovered. The river sheaf is in the light for the first time in the city centre in 100 years, and there's huge interest at local, regional and national level as to what we are doing. If I can show you some of these exciting discoveries in some of the photos, we've taken now hundreds of people into a very intensive engagement program on the site. We have discovered some cementation furnaces, you can see at the bottom of the picture, one of which could be one of the oldest, if not the oldest, in Yorkshire. You may have heard of the castle wall, so if I can explain, where you can see in the top picture those red barriers, that is not castle wall, that is castle market wall. You can see that it's better referred rather than castle wall on footings of the castle wall, which you can see, you know, the depth on the left-hand side of the photo, and these sort of you can see there is a wall as well crossing it. That is of a dwelling, probably built with castle stone, but not castle. Castle wall is what you can see there in the footings. We've made an exceptional discovery in some Civil War stakes, and we're going to replicate them throughout the site as a public art part of that. Wessex have won a national award for Rescue Project of the Year. further the castle project. You can see the northern edge of the moat, which is the bare rock. You can see on the top left-hand picture. And we also have, moving on to the 18th and 19th century, a Darnall with a slaughterhouse to the north and some housing, workers' housing at the bottom. We are hoping to reveal that. The last day of the archaeology dig back in the archaeology dig finished in November. I don't think there's a picture from November, but towards the end, you can see the team right next to a concrete chamber that houses the gatehouse remains that you can see at the bottom of it. So the team would have in front of them the drawbridge pier that comes from Exchange Street, and to their back they have where the drawbridge pier would have landed, as well as the tower, I think it's called. There is also a well, a 12.5 metre deep well, which we are hoping to reveal as well, but I've got no photo of that. The river sheaf is being daylighted. You can see on the aerial photo to the left, those areas with some yellow going across. That is the river as it looks now, and it's a wonderful sight. Getting into the project timescales and the budget update, there are two key issues that have led to extra costs and programme delays. The archaeology is clearly an asset to the park. However, it has led to a major redesign that we're still trying to complete. And also, when we entered into a contract with Kelbrae, the costs for the decoverting were at provisional stage. They've now been confirmed and designed in detail, and they are more expensive than expected. And so the programme has been revised, and the completion date will be towards the end of next year. And the costs have increased beyond the approved 21 million budget. So we are looking to identify Sheffield City Council additional sources of funding, and we will come back to this committee as well as the Economic Development and Skill Committee, hopefully next summer, and provide an update on that. I didn't want to finish without telling you a little bit about two other projects we were included in the Levelling Up Fund Gateway to Sheffield scheme, because it all really forms together a nice strategy. You can see at the back the castle, the site of the castle park. You can see some of the existing cultural venues, such as the Yorkshire Art Space and the University of Sheffield building, a creative industries building, and you can also see, for context, Fitzallan Square. The two projects that are on the way to being delivered as well, not by the council but by other the partners, are the S1 Art Space and Harmony Works. So just to let you know that Harmony Works is well on the way to complete all their funding package. They've got around 10 and they need just over 2, which they're happy they will get. And the objective is to open the former Canada Houses Harmony Works towards the autumn of 2027. And S1 Art Space wishes to provide a high-quality cultural space for Sheffield. They have bought a building that was last occupied by the Yorkshire Bank, and they've recently received a 1 million gainshare grant from Simca, and they're looking to refurbish and occupy as soon as possible. You have seen the recommendations in your reports. The key that there are no decisions to be taken. Is just to note the progress that we have made on the project, the strategic importance of the park for Castlegate and for economic regeneration, as well as community health and environmental perspectives. To know the extension of the programme, there are also included in your pack some initial proposals for maintaining the park that yourselves, as well as the Economic and Development Skills Committee, will be consulted when we can confirm the final funding package and know the progress on the project. Thank you for listening, and I think we're quite happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Lucia. Do I have any questions from colleagues? I do, from Councillor Mersrow, and then I'll go to Councillor Diamond, and then I'll take the others. Councillor Mersrow first.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the report. It's really interesting to read about this. Castlegate sits in my ward, and it's fantastic to hear about everything that's going on here. It's really exciting. There's so many positives, but we're running out of time, so I just wanted to comment on the ongoing success of the fundraising at Harmony Works. The renovation and repurposing of Canada House is such a brilliant addition to the city's cultural and educational scene, and from a transport perspective it's brilliant because it's so accessible to children by public transport and by foot as well. So fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Councillor Diamond.
Thank you so much for the report. Again, really excited about this. It's going to be a real asset to the city, especially the city centre residents. With green space will be key to ensuring the health and well-being of the projected 20,000 new residents and existing city centre residents. Really excited about the archaeological finds that you've found, and excited about visiting, and just sort of wondering how they were going to be incorporated. And will they be exhibited, some of them on the site? I think that'd be a real great attraction. I suppose there is a concern over where we're going to find the additional 5 million and pay for ongoing maintenance costs, but I think you've said that we'll be hearing more about that in future reports that you're going to bring to our committee and EDS. I just wanted to outline that we need to ensure the good active travel infrastructure, including bike parking, which is overlooked, and as it's in the city centre and we've got good public transport connections, most people will be accessing by walking, wheeling and cycling and public transport. Also really excited about deculverting of the River Sheaf and seeing that. It's about out of scope for the report, but I think Sheffield should have an ambition to have rivers that are clean enough to swim in. Our places in Europe have achieved like Paris and countries like the Netherlands. I mean, that would be a great attraction, but we're probably some way off that with the current levels of sewage and pollution that goes into our cities from private companies. But yeah, thanks again for the report, and really excited to visit.
Thank you very much. I'll just go to Lucia and Alan for just reflections before going to Councillor Gamble-Pugh and Councillor Riddler, and then after that, Councillor Sanger.
Thank you, Chair. Just, I think the one question in there was about how we would incorporate the archaeological remains into the park. I mean, the idea is that we will celebrate as much of the archaeology as we possibly can. The designs are still being finalised. There's a series of subgroups working on this, including sort of Friends of Sheffield Castle, other people on the designs to work this through. So I can't tell you what the answer is right now, but we're working on that at the moment.
Thank you very much, and I'll just go to Councillor Gamble-Pugh and Councillor Riddler. Councillor Gamble-Pugh.
Thank you, Chair. Mine isn't a question. I just wanted to just make an observation. One of my worries right back when the markets were initially demolished was that possibly we would hurry, and in doing so we would sweep aside this once in a lifetime chance to unearth some of the heritage and the history of the site. So I think we ought to be welcoming the fact that we're doing this at a pace where we can actually make the most of what we're finding of the roots and origins of the city. So thank you for that. And also, although I seem to be falling into a trap, every time we get one of these schemes, I seem to be saying like, this is the most exciting scheme that I can remember seeing. But yes, the most exciting scheme since the last scheme that I was the most excited about. And actually, specifically, when I look at this development of using public money to create a kind of really incredible public space with greenery and water, with those potential future development sites around it. The last time we saw something like that was the Peace Gardens, and that's done pretty well. For the city, so I've got a really good feeling about this, so thank you very much. Be looking forward to seeing how it unfolds.
Thank you, Councillor Gamble-Pugh. I'll just go to Councillor Riddler, and also thank you, Councillor Gamble-Pugh, for your really upbeat remarks there.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I would echo what everybody said about this being such a fantastic project, and the fact that we are now celebrating the rebirth of where Sheffield started. I think that like everybody else, the archaeological finds have been incredible, far beyond everybody's expectations. And I'm really pleased to see that further funding is being sought through really positive partnerships with other groups. There have been so many stakeholder groups involved in this project that I've worked alongside in my capacity as Heritage Champion, as well as being on this board. The tremendous amount of partnership work, I think, is to be commended, because I think that's been a huge advantage and driver towards the success of this scheme. The only thing that I would just put in there is that I know that great progress is now being made towards the designation of a conservation area. This is still a work in progress at the moment, but it would be really helpful, I feel, to this committee if at some point we can get updates through the committee on that progress, because that is another sort of piece of the link which will put it all together. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Vidler. And let's go to Lucia and Alan for just some reflections before going to Councillor Sanger.
Thank you. I mean, I think partnership has been a real firm characteristic of this project, and there are an awful lot of people interested in this. In terms of the conservation area, colleagues in planning are leading on that work in terms of conservation area designation, but I'm sure we can bring something back at the appropriate time. I do know it's due to add to public consultation in the summer.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. And Councillor Sanger.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you to the officers for the report. And really good to hear about the partnership working. A few reflections. I mean, obviously the first thing is I'm old enough to remember the raft races that we used to have when I was at university, and the Don is significantly cleaner now than it was then, but obviously more work is required. In my first year as a councillor back in 91-92, I was taken to the castle markets, and we went down and saw, the few remains, and we were told that, the new model army had destroyed it completely. So I was very pleased in 2001 to go to, because I've got the pictures, and when my kids were 6, when we went on a tour of the archaeological work there, when a lot more of the castle's history was found, particularly the 11th and 12th century footings. So really good to know that about how much more there is, and how much of the 17th century siege works have been uncovered. But particularly excited this 13th century works, the things at the end of the Second Barons' War. So the whole of that part of English history, right from 1066 to the Commonwealth in 1666. Whereas we tend to think of Sheffield's history as being the Industrial Revolution, so it's really good to take it right back. But just to remember, the word Sheffield is an Anglo-Saxon word, so we still need to know where Walfield's Hall is. We still need to understand the Anglo-Saxon settlement that gave Sheffield its name. So really, I'm really looking forward to the site visit, but really pleased that we're going. We're treating the archaeology with respect, and we're seeing what we can retain. And we've got a really strong partnership, and we're doing this right. I've been looking forward to this report for many years. We've all been talking about revitalising the Castlegate site, so it's now happening, so really pleased. So obviously disappointing that it's going to cost more money, but I agree with Councillor Gamble-Pugh. We should do this right, because this is 1,000 years of Sheffield's history here, probably longer, because there's a reason the Normans built the castle on that site. So the history will go back. The history will go back longer. So let's get it right, and let's have something that's here for the next few hundred years. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sanger. And I'll just go back to Lucia and Alan for any final reflections before we vote on this particular item.
Just a final reflection, so the reports in front of you, you've seen where the plans are getting up to in terms of how we construct the site. The way that we've established the partnership means that this isn't the end of what we're doing in Castlegate. This is just the first phase, and there's more work to be done moving forward. So just to reassure you, and we'll keep you updated.
Diamond, that related to this project, there's a new transport scheme which will significantly improve active travel in the area. So there's going to be a new junction, Waingate, Haymarket, Exchange Street, Castle Street. That's nearly £1 million worth of project, and that will be finished before the park is completed, so ready for that. And that will make a lot of the movements, for pedestrians and cycles in particular, a lot easier.
Thank you, and Lucia, thank you very much for I guess the service that you've given to this project, but also Castlegate over the years. I visited the site yesterday again with you, and it was really wonderful for you to be able to kind of run me through the various different elements and how you contributed to that over the years, and also the development life cycle of this project as well, and how you have worked with various different funders over the years to bring us up to the stage where we are today. So thank you, and I know that committee members who can make that site visit alongside a number of other people, I think from Simca's business board, will really enjoy that particular meeting and visit. So the recommendations are on page 351 of the report pack. Can I see that colleagues are content with it? If you're not, then please do raise your hand to express that disapproval. But I can see that colleagues are content, so therefore that item 12, has been carried. And that does take us to the end of our meeting today. It's the last meeting of our municipal year, but before we end that meeting, I'd like to take a moment to thank Rachel Appleyard. Now, Rachel is our Principal Democratic Services Officer, and I'm sure that the committee will agree that she's done an absolutely fantastic job this year supporting us. And also she's really helped us as a committee team, making sure that we can properly consider items and make decisions, and it's no easy task when we've got such a busy agenda. And she's also had to deal with me as well, which I can't imagine is a particularly easy job. Now, Rachel will be temporarily leaving us to have a baby, and we're all really excited about that, aren't we? And we'll wish her the best of lovely times with her maternity leave. So on behalf of the committee, Rachel, I just wanted to give you some flowers, and hopefully you'll accept them as a small token of our appreciation as well. So thank you very much, and best of luck with your maternity leave as well. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, everybody. They're lovely.
So that concludes our meeting today. Hopefully I will see you all in the next municipal year.